You know nothing about the Mother series. Well, maybe you do, but there's a lot out there and we're going to cover it. Malphasura, Dag123, and I compiled a ton of information from existing Mother icebergs and added plenty more. This iceberg has information on the games, fan culture, and a ton about EarthBound 64, and so much more, covering 250 topics. So let the relay begin. This is the Ultimate Mother Series Iceberg.
Here we go.
Ness has been a mainstay playable fighter in the Super Smash Bros. Series since its inception, all thanks to the many HAL staff who had previously worked on EarthBound vouching for him, and this was a big deal too, as he is the only unlockable fighter who wasn't created with repurposed parts, having been built from the ground up. Ness would go on to appear in the subsequent games, with items, stages, spirits, and eventually other EarthBound characters also appearing. In Brawl, Lucas also became a mainstay, for the most part. These games were how many Mother fans discovered the series outside of Japan due to EarthBound's commercial failure in the states prior, and is a very common shared experience among many in the fandom. The series also gave Mother fans the only official piece of Mother 3 merchandise to exist outside of Japan, that being the Lucas amiibo. While it can't be definitely said that Smash saved the Mother series, the writing's on the walls. A person now widely known to have come from the EarthBound fandom is Toby Fox, the creator of Undertale and Deltarune, two games notable for being influenced by the Mother series. Fox has seen major success with his games, even eventually having one of his own, along with his music being added to Smash as well. Prior to going by his name, he used the moniker Radiation on Starman.net, and is also known for being the creator of the EarthBound Halloween hack. The hack is very dated, and is remembered for its atmosphere and inappropriate language. Fox has since disowned the hack, citing his dissatisfaction with it. Fox has since gone on to meet the creator of the Mother series, Shigesato Itoi, and discuss games with him. According to one article, Fox approached Itoi about him directing a fourth title in the Mother series, but before he could, Itoi told him he should make, quote, Undertale 2, leading to Fox forgoing his original plan. The series has been noted for its influence on the modern RPG genre, especially independent games, leading to the phrase quirky EarthBound-inspired RPG about depression being commonly used for some time when its influence is a bit on the nose. Beyond indie games though, the series, particularly Mother 2, has been mentioned as an influence on several games since its release. A notable mainstream game inspired by EarthBound is South Park: The Stick of Truth, and not to derail, but an influence on the South Park franchise in general.
I mean, I grew up loving RPGs, and I grew up loving, Mother was one that I really loved because Mother was this little RPG where you were a kid and it started in your backyard in this UFO land, and it just felt like, oh, I'm a kid running around and doing my thing, and oh, I'm gonna fight this rat. It wasn't like, oh, okay, I'm this huge death demon knight and I'm fighting this giant, things were very grounded, which I like. And so apart from just being like, oh, I like, something where I can walk around the show, I also just like RPGs where it can be a little bit real and I can be a kid playing a game.
Right. The games have also had a strong impact on other Nintendo games, such as the Pokemon franchise and Animal Crossing series, a life sim with RPG elements. As time passes, it only seems EarthBound has grown more influential too, routinely being considered one of the greatest RPGs, if not greatest games of all time. This influence can likely be traced to the creator of the series being an outsider to the games industry prior to creating the first Mother game, and purposely attempting to challenge the conventions of the RPG genre, being a fan of the Dragon Quest series leading up to the creation of his own games. In 2016, a video released by the Game Theorist channel proposed a theory that Sans from the game Undertale is actually the same person as Ness from EarthBound. The creator of the theory, MatPat, later clarified the theory wasn't meant to be taken seriously, but nonetheless it became a widespread meme around the internet, and continues to be one of the most popular inside jokes within both the Mother and Undertale fandoms. It also paved the way for several parodies of the theory, and revived some interest in the theory that Ness is the hot dog guy from Mother 3. Toby Fox himself responded to the theory, not happy with it bringing attention to his aforementioned Halloween hack, and it seemingly caused him some personal troubles between him and his fans. Since then, as of 2024, the matter seems to be resolved, with Toby Fox responding to the announcement of MatPat's retirement with a jokey, poorly drawn picture of both Sans and Papyrus dressed as Ness. Just before both of those things, coincidentally, I actually did a video on the theory attempting to prove it, which you can watch via this card if you're interested. The joke continues to prevail, and since its creation seems to have become much less hostile than it sometimes turned into initially, and even made its way into two notable works. The first being seemingly the Picture of the Day series done by Masahiro Sakurai, creator and director of the Super Smash Bros. Series, in which he posted a picture of the two characters for Undertale's anniversary, though some have dismissed this as being a nod to EarthBound's influence on the former. And the second is the film adaptation of Five Nights at Freddy's, in which MatPat himself makes a cameo as a waiter named Ness, which was confirmed by FNAF creator Scott Cawthon to be a reference to the video. Another well-known joke within and outside the EarthBound fandom is the former Nintendo of America CEO Reggie's perceived neglect of Mother 3. Over the years, there had been several confrontations between fans and Reggie at conventions and expos asking about Mother 3 getting an official release outside of Japan. At the time, Mother 3 had been out there for almost a year, with no sign of getting localized. And seeing as Reggie was president of Nintendo of America, he was the obvious boogeyman to point to. This culminated in a joke done by the show Robot Chicken that was commissioned and shown by Nintendo at their E3 2014 press conference. The sketch shocked many fans and led many to believe Mother 3 would be announced at that conference, but it never was. The joke became quite antagonistic of Reggie over time, but has since become much more lighthearted, and follows Reggie even now, years after his retirement. And Reggie has since made many jokes about it on his Twitter account, and has been asked about it publicly. More recently, Reggie has discussed the game's troubled timeline in his autobiography, and made public statements that its lack of localization was not due to its content.
Another popular meme even outside the fandom, this is a series of videos made by multiple creators where they take bizarre photographs and place EarthBound music over them, oftentimes photoshopping them to resemble a battle from the game. This seems to have descended from two other memes, one being the What meme, an image macro format that was paired with the track Sanctuary Guardian, and one where people post photographs of strange things that look like they could be EarthBound enemies. This meme seems to have been started in 2020 and has drastically lost momentum since, but many of the existing videos on YouTube still reign with several thousands and even millions of views. Mother 1, now known by many as EarthBound Beginnings, didn't receive an official release outside of Japan until 2015, 26 years after its release on the Famicom. The only way to play the game in English was through one of two translated versions, first being EarthBound 0, the name given to the official localization worked on by Phil Sandhop that was released online by Demiforce in 1998 after it had surfaced earlier that year, and the second is the unofficial, although more faithful fan translation made by Tomato, real name Clyde Mandolin, and released in 2011. Several attempts were made to call for its re-release on the Wii's Virtual Console, however Nintendo never did so, with the community believing it would not be possible legally. The Western Mother community had mostly given up hope until in January of 2013, Nintendo put Mother 2 for sale on the Wii U Virtual Console in Japan as part of their celebration of the Famicom's 30th anniversary and the 19th anniversary of Mother 2, followed by a Western re-release of its localized counterpart EarthBound the summer of that year. This suddenly opened up the gates to the possibility of seeing international release, and ultimately, in 2015, during the Nintendo World Championships, they played a video of Shigesato Itoi himself revealing that for the 20th anniversary of EarthBound's Western release, Mother 1 would finally be coming to the West officially as EarthBound Beginnings, using the Phil Sandhop localization. EarthBound has since been re-released on the 3DS and SNES Classic, and both games were made available again 7 years later as part of the Nintendo Switch Online membership. Shigesato Itoi, or as he's called in Japan, Darling, is the creator of the Mother series and director of the first two titles in the trilogy. Despite only being known as the creator of EarthBound here in the West, he's a very multifaceted individual. Back home in Japan, he's primarily a copywriter, someone who writes slogans and taglines for products, including some Studio Ghibli films, one of which he even acted in, voicing the girl's father in My Neighbor Totoro. Aside from that though, he's also a novelist, lyricist, and actor. Itoi also has hobbies like gold mining, professional Monopoly, and blogging. In 2016, he launched an Instagram for pets called Dokonoko that you can sign up for yourself. It's safe to say he's had his hands in many pots. In the 1980s, Itoi and his then-wife split up, leading to him seeing his daughter much less than he would have liked to. This fed into much of his inspiration for the first Mother game. Itoi developed an interest in video games due to his asthma keeping him up at night from coughing fits. This would force him to sit up in bed, and he'd play Dragon Quest and Mario games to distract himself, with that interest in video games eventually becoming a business relationship with Nintendo to create the Mother games we know and love. Itoi devotes a lot of his time into Hobonichi, the company he founded in the late 90s that handles most of his ventures, including the Hobonichi Mother project, which continues to produce and license new Mother merchandise to this day. A widespread theory about EarthBound for several decades has been that Gygus, the final boss of EarthBound, resembles a fetus, and that the trail leading up to him resembles intestines or a birth canal. This theory is among the only ones to be outright debunked by Itoi. One of the most well-known stories regarding the series is that the whole scene of confronting and fighting Gygus is an attempt by Itoi to capture and demonstrate the childhood trauma he experienced when, as a young boy, he mistakenly walked into the wrong movie theater and witnessed a scene of a woman being dismembered, but interpreted it as being a rape. The film in question is called The Military Policeman and the Dismembered Beauty. Many theories have circulated about what Gygus is meant to actually represent aside from being a literal alien, and another popular one is that he's meant to be a representation of the devil himself. Many also point out that when flipped upside down, he resembles his previous form, Geeg, from EarthBound Beginnings. Tony is Jeff's roommate at his boarding school in EarthBound, and joins Jeff briefly. Tony cares deeply for Jeff's well-being and writes him a letter that the player can read and show to him at the end of the game. Tony is canonically gay, as stated by Itoi himself. Itoi said about Tony's creation that he also knew a gay boy when he was young, and thought to include him since gay children exist, and thought it would serve to make the game's world feel more real and like our own. Itoi, however, never said that the gay boy in the game was in fact Tony, but was later confirmed to be him by EarthBound's head localizer, Mark Lindblom. Tony's feelings for Jeff seem to go unrequited, as Jeff does not seem to pick up on them, or at least explicitly, and the two are never confirmed to be romantically involved.
When EarthBound was being localized in the mid-90s, the project was being headed by Marcus Lindblom. It was initially roughly translated by Masayuki Miura, a Japanese writer, who then worked with and helped Lindblom to contextualize many things aimed more at Japanese audiences, and helped translate the intentions to an American one. Lindblom often worked extensive hours to keep on schedule, and even included his daughter in the game as a young girl NPC and magicant, and she would go on in later years to actually play and enjoy EarthBound herself. Despite being praised as a very faithful translation, some things had to be changed altogether, and symbols such as the Red Cross were entirely removed from the game. Another major change was putting Ness in his pajamas in Magicant. Lindblom has since left Nintendo, but continues to talk about and adore EarthBound to this day, and was even working on a tell-all book about the experience of localizing it, but it was seemingly shut down and has never been released. Many changes were made to the game overall though, and were extensively chronicled by Clyde Mandelin, Tomato, in his book Legends of Localization 2, EarthBound, where he breaks down the majority of them, brick by brick. This even included swearing in the original, which was a definite no-no for Nintendo games published outside of Japan at the time. Leslie Swan also worked on EarthBound, funny enough, who, if you don't know, went on to be the voice actress for Princess Peach in Super Mario 64 a couple years later. Check out Tomato's book if you haven't, and much of it is published by him to read for free online, linked in the description. Speaking of, Clyde Mandelin, known online as Tomato, is a pillar within the Mother community. Tomato is one of the founders, along with Reed Young, of Starman.net, the Mother series' premier fan site on the entire internet. Aside from that, he's a professional translator who has done much professional work translating several anime series for Funimation, and has also worked for Babel Media. Tomato is most widely known as the lead translator and programmer of the Mother 3 fan translation, as well as the Mother 1+2 fan translation. Beyond that, he's also authored several books chronicling the localization differences of many games. He's also the founder and site runner of the now defunct EarthBound Central, which launched in 2009, but has been down since early 2023. He is among the most respected members of the community, and is one of the sole reasons as to how many people have been able to play Mother 3, with the fan translation reportedly having been downloaded more than 100,000 times during its first week of release. Melo was warned during the process by an alleged industry insider that by releasing the fan translation, he'd essentially be putting the nail in the coffin of there ever being a chance of an official one. Needless to say, it was still published. In 1994, when EarthBound was coming out, for some reason Nintendo really decided to lean into the gross out angle when marketing the game. This led to the infamous scratch and sniff ads and "This game stinks" slogan. They really should have gotten Itoi to do this. It's literally his job. Anyway, with EarthBound's subsequent commercial failure, many have placed the blame on its lackluster marketing campaign, though it very much can be attributed to the game's marked up price, since every copy came with the player's guide included, which is super cool by the way, but nonetheless made the price more expensive and big. eventually leading to the game winding up in bargain bins across the country, and of course, it didn't help that the game wasn't reviewing very well in the States, many marking it down for its less ambitious graphics than some other SNES games. This would result in Nintendo being uninterested in re-releasing the game for almost 20 years, when it was eventually put up on the Wii U eShop. EarthBound 64, the original vision for Mother 3, was in development for about a decade, and shown a few times at trade shows. This version of the game was much more expansive in scope than the final game ended up being. The N64 version was planned for a worldwide release as the system's only traditional JRPG, besides Paper Mario, but saw multiple delays due to the programmers having trouble making a 3D game of such grand scope, amongst several other things. There is so much more to say about EarthBound 64, and we'll be covering it extensively later in this video, as well as in a separate video purely on the subject. This section is just an overview. The game was delayed again and again, and eventually was cancelled before development was restarted for the Game Boy Advance, at Shigeru Miyamoto's suggestion. Mystery Toy was the game's original director, but stepped back when development for the GBA began, only serving as the scenario writer. The game's development spanned several consoles, and would have likely been one of the most influential games ever made had it released. Much information is both known and unknown regarding its development and what the final vision may have looked like. To this day, more than 20 years since its initial cancellation, much of it still remains shrouded in mystery, and is considered one of the holy grails among cancelled video games. Since Starman.net and EarthBound Central, Mother Forever has served as the primary Mother fan site in the West. It hosts articles and works by several contributors about the series and its fan community, and created the annual Mother fan community event Mother Direct, where Mother fans show off of their fan projects and Mother-inspired independent games.
Stephen George has probably created more of the most notable EarthBound fan projects than anyone else. He's been a longtime member and contributor to Starman.net. Outside the forums, though, he's also created the web series Ninten Speaks, a vlog parody series where he played Ninten, /EarthBound, an Earthbound-themed public stunt series, Bobbies Are Borange, a live comedic Earthbound reenactment, Lloyds Are Not Christmas, one of Mother 1, and Tree From My Youth of Mother 3, just to name a few. He's also fondly known as the I Am Earthbound guy. Stephen is an outstanding member of the community, and nowadays is known for doing daily vlogs for more than 15 years, and Let's Plays both on YouTube and Twitch with his wife Mallory, another member of the EarthBound fandom. The Casey Bat is one of the most powerful weapons Ness can equip in EarthBound, and it is always dropped by Master Barf after defeating him in Deep Darkness. However, it's also infamously known as one of the most difficult weapons to use, as it has a 75% miss rate when equipped. It is found used for grinding though, as it does still give Ness an additional plus 125 offense, making it possible to instant kill many enemies you wouldn't be able to otherwise. This buff makes it the most powerful weapon in the game, even gaining Ness more strength than the Gutsy Bat, which only buffs him plus 100 offense, though that one's still considered better due to its consistent hit rate and a huge buff to Ness's gut stat as well. The Casey Bat itself, however, is a reference to the poem Casey at the Bat, a ballad of the Republic sung in the year 1888 by Ernest Thayer, and is considered the most famous baseball poem ever written, though at first it was published anonymously under his pen name Finn. The poem tells the story of a small-town baseball team who are down 2 runs in the last inning. The crowd is convinced they can win, however, if their star player, Casey, can make it up to bat. Players get onto first and third base, and then it's Casey's turn. Casey's so confident in his abilities, he doesn't even swing at the first 2 pitches, getting 2 strikes. Casey then misses the final pitch and strikes out. This is why the Casey Bat is very powerful, but misses 3 out of 4 times. The people from the White Ship are the cast of Mother 3. Towards the end of Mother 3, Lita recounts a story from long before the events of the game that explain the backstory of the Nowhere Islands and all of its players. As the world was ending, a group of people boarded a white ship, and it took these people to a place that became known as the Nowhere Islands, and was the only place left intact after the world's fall. This is because the islands are actually the body of a large dragon. After arriving, the survivors created a story for them all to follow, with parts for everyone involved to play. Their old world names remained, however. They would assume these new lives and forget all about their old ones, and their memories were stored in the Egg of Light. with Wes and Duster assigned to retrieve it if a dangerous situation were to ever occur. Leader was the lone person designated to retain these memories, which is why his name also resembles the word leader. Due to the actual period of time not being exactly clear between their arrival and the start of the game's story, certain younger characters like Allie, Lucas, and Klaus were not among those actually on the White Ship, as Kumatora was an infant when it all transpired, meaning Mother 3 only takes place a couple decades after the previous world's end.
The 8 melodies refer to 2 different sets of melodies in the Mother series, and both are also referenced in Mother 3 by the track titled 16 Melodies. In Mother 1, the 8 melodies are the lullaby that Maria would sing to soothe Geeg while nurturing him. Throughout the game, Ninten traverses America to seek out these melodies. They're found in a doll in Ninten's house, sung by a canary in Canary Village, sung by a singing monkey at the abandoned zoo, played by a piano at Rosemary's house, a cactus in Yucca Desert, within a dragon in Magic Hat's underground, within Eve, and at George's gravestone on Mounty Toy. Ninten finds the melodies to recite them to the leader of Magic Hat, Queen Mary, in order to help her remember the song, and in the game's climax, the emotional power of the song eventually enables the defeat of Geeg during the final confrontation on Mounty Toy. Ninten can also play the 8 melodies on his ocarina. The 8 melodies also have lyrics, and a full vocal version can be heard in the official Mother 1 vocal album. These 8 melodies have become prominent in Mother soundtracks and have gone on to be remixed for the Super Smash Bros. Series. In Mother, the melodies are sang about by a bard in Magic Hat, who gives hints on where to find them. In EarthBound, the 8 melodies sound different but follow a similar principle. Ness must travel to the 8 sanctuary locations around Eagle Land to collect them, and can hear them through the soundstone given to him by Buzz. Attaining all of them allows Ness into his own Magic Hat and unlocks his full psychokinetic abilities. The melodies are located at Giant Step, Lilliput Steps, Milky Well, Rainy Circle, Magnet Hill, Pink Cloud, Lumine Hall, and the Fire Spring. As mentioned, the melodies are referenced in Mother 3 and also play during a medley of Mother songs during the credits. And while Mother 3 doesn't have its own set of melodies to collect, the love theme's emotional purpose is considered comparable. The Mr. Saturn are weird little guys who appear in Mother 2 and Mother 3, speaking in a strange font only seen when speaking to them or by reading their notes. This font was designed by Shigesato Itoi and is based on his daughter's handwriting from when she was 3 years old. He assigned this font to their dialect to help emphasize them as symbols of innocence, one of the only pieces of symbolism he's gone on record to clarify. This made for one of the most difficult elements of EarthBound's localization, as a stylistically similar font had to be created that didn't compromise too much on legibility. There was significant overlap between Mother and Pokemon Red and Green's development teams, and Itoi's game development company, Ape Inc., co-developers of the first 2 Mother games, and Soul Studio working on the GBA's Mother 1+2 port, was succeeded by Creatures Inc. Creatures are joint owners of the Pokemon Company and manage the trading card game, merchandising, and creation of the 3D Pokemon models and animations since they first made the jump to 3D, including brand new assets for the, as of writing, 1,025 Pokemon, redone for 60 frames per second and HD resolutions. Because of these connections, many have speculated that the appearance of Mewtwo's design was inspired by Geeg from Mother 1, as the two share some similarities like their feline-esque features, psychic abilities, and posing. However, there's never been any sort of official confirmation on this theory. Seemingly as a nod to this, Lucas does have to fight Mewtwo in his classic mode in Smash Ultimate, but this is a bit of a reach. Lucas was also paired with the Pokemon trainer in Brawl's Subspace Emissary, which may be a nod to their entwined origins. Many have speculated on the possible reasons Mother 3 never made it outside of its home country. A popular theory has been that Mother 3's political themes caused Nintendo to be hesitant to release in places like the United States. Some believe the pig masks represent fascism and see it as an on-the-nose critique of the American political landscape. Another point to be made is how picturesque life seems to be in the seemingly communist utopia of Tazameli Village before the arrival of Porky's influence, and seeing as communist ideals have been a long-time boogeyman in American culture, it might have been seen as too dangerous to Nintendo's reputation. Aside from political undertones, another of the most popular theories has been that the Magypsies were the reason the game wasn't released, for fear that the characters would be taken as Nintendo taking an official stance on queer rights at a time when most businesses played it safe and refrained from commenting on social issues. Reggie, however, stated that Mother 3's content was not the cause of this, and was a simple business decision. It was more likely never localized for the same reason as Mother 1. Mother 3 released too late to make it to the West, being published in 2006 for the Game Boy Advance, while the console's dual-screen successor was already well established in the market, with internal plans already in place for a revision removing GBA backwards compatibility in late 2008. The game would likely have taken about a year to translate and localize, so it didn't make sense to the company to go through that work for a game that was unlikely to sell compared to newer DS titles that would be easier to localize. This is, of course, unconfirmed.
One of the most talked about things regarding the series is its staple of sampling music. Many have suggested the games are stealing music, but the artistic liberties taken with them have differentiated them enough from the original works and helped bring their worlds, that are based on the real one, to life. These samples range from several rock and roll to EDM tracks, and many videos have been made chronicling them. New samples have been discovered in the games as recently as within the last few years. The game's music has been a hotly debated topic for some time, and is a major reason many point to Mother 3 never getting an official release, making copyrights and the whole legal ground tricky. However, there is also the counter-argument that EarthBound did the same thing, and still came out on the other side several times untouched in this regard, as well as EarthBound Beginnings. In fact, it was believed for a long time by many that EarthBound's music was the reason for it not receiving a re-release for almost 20 years, but this seemingly wasn't the case for it at all. Some notable artists who have been sampled include Chuck Berry, the Beatles, Michael Jackson, many TV shows, movies, and several classical composers. In the Angry Video Game Nerd episode covering EarthBound, the nerd agrees with a fan theory that suggests that the final battle with Gygus in the game is an abortion. Evidence cited being the entrance to Gygus's cave symbolizing that of a woman's legs, and further inside being the uterus, and the outline of a baby being present during a phase of the boss battle. Ultimately, while the nerd does acknowledge Mystery Toy's supposed previous denial of the theory, he emphasizes the baby outline, which in all fairness is an unsettling detail. Afterwards, the nerd gives his own interpretation of the scene with the previous theory in mind, suggesting that Gygus is an eternal, travelling entity that is reincarnated as Ness, and that his form in Mother 1 was just another body that he had previously inhabited. A pretty interesting theory all around, especially given the game's emphasis on Ness fighting his evil side as shown in Magicka. This accentuates that with the event of Ness fighting the embodiment of all evil, who in this interpretation is also still just the evil part of himself, that he's performing an exorcism on Gygus from Ness's birth to prevent him from being evil. Despite it not releasing outside of Japan until 2015 officially, the game was planned to be localized and released in the States. It was localized officially as EarthBound in 1990, and the translation was actually complete, with a full 1991 release set. Due to the NES being on the way out though by this point, with the SNES having been released, it was decided it'd be better to cut their losses and just shelf the localization. This localization eventually leaked online though, after being discovered by the fan group Neo Demiforce, who had been working on their own fan translation at the time, and is what was known as EarthBound 0. The prototype had been sold to a game collector named Kenny Brooks, and he's the one who posted the ROM online. Before releasing it though, Kenny added the 0 to the title screen and modded it to bypass copy protection checks. Sadly, this translation sucks. It takes a lot of the personality out of many elements of the game's writing and is overall pretty bland. This localization was actually used as the basis for Mother 1+2's Japanese release, and is the version we officially got later, repackaged as EarthBound Beginnings. This version did however add some neat enemy descriptions, and is the version that added the double speed function, the run button. Since then, 4 other cartridges of the prototype have been found as well. One of them resides in Nintendo of America's headquarters.
EarthBound Zero's localization has been greatly impacted by Nintendo of America producer and scriptwriter Phil Sandhop, who requested several changes to be made during the process. This included town names being changed from the names of holidays to things like Podunk and the like. Sandhop has also said there were intentions to release the game with an 80-page instruction manual, but financial and marketing concerns caused all of this to never see the light of day. Among the things he asked for changes to be made to were several enemy sprites that included blood or other suggestive visuals, NPCs that too closely resembled characters from the Peanuts, and any sort of religious imagery. And yes, they took the Crow enemy's classic and iconic cigarette. Funny enough, they also changed the names of some enemies, like the Devil Truck to Psycho Truck, and the Violent Zombie to Nasty Zombie. Seems pretty insignificant, but apparently they were important enough to include in most future re-releases of the game. While it's known as EarthBound outside of Japan, the series' original title is Mother, which Itoy chose due to the game's more sentimental, emotional nature in comparison to many other video games at the time. And it also clearly ties into Maria and Gyug's relationship, a central element to the game's story. Aside from theming, however, Itoy has said the song Mother by John Lennon was also a big inspiration for the series' name. Like we said before, he is a big fan of the Beatles. The song was released in 1970 as the opener to his album John Lennon Plastic Ono Band, and according to Lennon is about 99% of parents. And the song specifically addresses his own parents, both of whom abandoned him. His father, Alfred Lennon, left when he was a baby, and his mother, Julia, did not live with him, though the two maintained a good relationship. The song was inspired by Lennon's experiences with primal therapy, a form of psychotherapy to treat childhood trauma, and he later released a live version of the song as well in 1972 from a concert he performed in Madison Square Garden. The three Mother games all have their share of rare items and enemies. Mother ones are relatively easier to come by, with the most notable rare item being the flamethrower, which can be dropped by BB gang members at a rate of 1 in 16, and the most notable rare enemy is the Groucho, found in Magicant, which, all things considered, is also not that rare. If the player just defends and doesn't fight, it'll just leave and reward a generous amount of experience to the party. In EarthBound, things get more extreme, where several items are designated as enemy drops that are attained at a 1 in 128 rate. That is a 0.78% chance. These items also range from things as relatively helpful like PSI caramels to some of the best items in the game like the Star Pendant or Gutsy Bat. The most infamous of these is the Sword of Kings, Pooh's ultimate weapon, which can only be won in the Stonehenge base for a limited time, as the enemies will all disappear permanently from the area after the Starman Deluxe boss is defeated. These drops were also noted in the EarthBound Player's Guide, with one well-known typo, that the Gutsy Bat is attained from the Krakens in Magicant and not the Bionic Krakens in the Cave of the Past. Whoops. These item drops can also be manipulated with save states by opening this menu and moving the cursor one time per attempt to change the code by one number. While opening this menu changes it non-stop until it's closed. The most notable of EarthBound's rare enemies are the caterpillars, which appear in the game's deserts, that when defeated give the party an insane amount of experience, usually gaining everyone at least one entire level. Mother 3's items are a bit more generous, dropping at a rate of 1 in 33. These items are also mostly the ultimate armor and weapons for the party. As for the enemies, Mother 3 has some interesting ones, such as the Bright Smile and Top Dogfish. However, unlike the previous two games, many players feel more motivated to seek these rare enemies out to fill out the battle memory for 100% completion.
When Mother was initially pitched to Shigeru Miyamoto, he was hesitant due to Nintendo's recent reputation of having produced many poor-quality celebrity tie-in games. These ranged from cheap film-to-game adaptations to slapping a celebrity onto an otherwise standalone title. But one many point to as being his cause of concern is Takeshi's Challenge, also known as The Ultimate Challenge from Beat Takeshi. Takeshi Kitano is a Japanese comedian and filmmaker known for his comedy films. He's also been known to partake in many other professions, but filmmaking is his main one. In the mid-1980s, he approached Nintendo about developing a game where the player plays as him on a treasure hunting adventure. The game's release was a success, selling about 800,000 copies, which, mind you, is double Mother 1's sales in Japan. However, it was very negatively received by critics and fans alike due to its high difficulty, obtuse solutions to its puzzles, and questionable content. The game is considered to be one of the worst video games ever made, and while it's not been officially stated as the reason for the company's hesitance when creating Mother, it's considered to be very likely. Something a lot of people don't know, however, is that the game was re-released on the Japanese Virtual Console in 2009 and again in 2017 for Android phones with new content. This version features a whole new stage with new music by the same development studio that made the original Famicom game. Though Itoi's dedication was questioned, he made it clear to Miyamoto this project was very important to him and cleared his schedule to place his focus squarely on it, resulting in a massive critical and commercial success for the company, becoming the best-selling game of 1989. In case you haven't noticed, the fandom likes to propose a lot of "this character is also this character" theories, often founded on nothing or next to nothing. One that's prevailed for a long time is that Ninten and Ness are supposedly somehow related. This has ranged from suggesting that they're cousins to alternate versions of one another, but many still say Ninten is actually Ness's father. Now, while the games only taking place less than 10 years apart makes this very apparently impossible, Itoi himself has also weighed in on this question, stating that they are, quote, both the same person and not, and he made their appearances similar and retained the ability to name the boys as a way for players to be able to make that choice for themselves. Given how many other elements of Mother 1 were reimagined and recycled for Mother 2, this makes sense. Even despite this, the two characters have been made into different people by both Nintendo and fans over the years. This theory has also led people to posit that Ness's mother would be Anna. However, while she goes unnamed officially, in the novelization of Mother 2, her name is Rachel. While it's basically confirmed by Itoi they're not meant to have any canon relation, it's still a popular theory even now. In Magicant, in both Mother 1 and 2, the main protagonist can recruit a flying man to assist them in battle by visiting their house. Only one can join at a time, and they cannot be taken out of Magicant. They have a set amount of HP, and when depleted they will die. And I mean really actually die. They don't get knocked out, they are dead and can't be revived. When this happens, a grave for them will appear outside their home for you to see should you choose to come back for another. You can have as many as 5 to help you get through Magicant, though in EarthBound the 4th will warn you not to take them for granted. In both games, their graves have unique text. However, in Mother 2, they have much more unique text made to make you feel bad for continuing to kill them. In order, they read, Ness's courage is resting here. He fought well and died. Another one of Ness's courage is resting here. He damaged evil terribly and finally died. Here he rests. I didn't have time to have his name chiseled into this tombstone. Someone's tombstone. And finally, if you carelessly let all 5 die, the last one reads, Of course we're your courage, but we warned you not to treat us like trash. Didn't you get it? This isn't courage, it's desperation. If you don't understand courage, look it up in the dictionary, okay? My name's the Final Flying Man. The Flying Men also appear in Smash 4 and Ultimate on the Magicant stage, where they can become allies in the same fashion. The Mother 1 vocal album also contains a track titled Flying Man that whimsically captures the mortality of the Flying Man and the courage they represent. In Mother 3, when the player arrives at Saturn Valley, it's overrun by the Pigmask army. One of the terrorizers is an enemy known as Frightbot. This enemy has an attack where it tells many different scary stories, such as a spine-tingling story, a blood-curdling story, a pants-wettingly scary story, a bone-chillingly scary story, a story so scary you want to cover your ears, a story so scary you'll never go to the bathroom at night again, a story so scary you couldn't help but laugh, and a scary story with some deeply touching moments mixed in. The Frightbots are also found telling these stories to the Mr. Saturns as a form of torture. Despite all of these detailed explanations, however, none of them have any effect on the player during battle, not even some sort of status ailment. Interestingly though, there is actually sort of a lore explanation to this, with its battle memory description reading, quote, A robot programmed to terrorize Mr. Saturns with frightening words. Humans aren't scared though. However, the flavor text would still have you believe that these stories are scary to at least somebody, since while I can believe Mr. Saturns are easily terrorized wimps, I cannot believe that they know what a spine-tingling feeling is, which presents several implications. 1. The party is scared but keeps their cool through it. 2. That they scare Boney, since he's not a human, but he's too much of a smooth operator to be affected in the moment. Or 3. The party members are not human. The Frightbot also has an unused backspray.
Buzzbuzz's prophecy is told to Ness, Porky, and Picky at the beginning of EarthBound. The prophecy is as follows. I'm from 10 years in the future, and in the future, all is devastation. Gygus, the universal cosmic destroyer, sent all to the horror of eternal darkness. However, you must listen. Where I am from, there is a well-known legend that has been handed down from ancient times. It says, when the chosen boy reaches the point, he will find the light. The passing of time will shatter the nightmare rock and reveal the path of light. You see, it is my opinion that you are that boy, Ness. This, I believe, Gygus' monstrous plan must have been set in motion somewhere on Earth. If you start to confront the enemy immediately, you may have time to counter the evil intentions of Gygus. 3 things are of utmost importance: wisdom, courage, and friendship. The legends from ancient times tell of 3 boys and a girl who defeat Gygus. I will tell you more later. Go now, and don't be anxious about the future. You have much work to do, Ness. This section of text has become a copy-paster across the fandom, but BuzzBuzz himself opens up some interesting explanations. such as, if he emerged from the meteor, does this mean it's not actually a meteor and some kind of ship? Probably. Anyway, the prophecy serves as the reasoning for why Ness must be the boy to pursue and defeat Gygus. Classic chosen one stuff. Mystery Toy has gone on record several times saying he will never make a fourth Mother game. He has, however, said that if he were to, it would be centered on the central idea of romantic love. This makes sense, as love has been the through line throughout the whole trilogy, so another exploration of a different kind of it is a logical step to take. He's also said that he wishes someone else would make the game, because he would love to play it, and that Mother 4 is the player's life. This has resulted in many attempting to make their own Mother 4, in the form of fan games, the most infamous being a project initially called Mother 4, but rebranded to Oddity. The fan game has been in development for more than 10 years, and many are skeptical that it will ever be completed. In recent years, however, another Mother 4 fan game has been in development, and as mentioned before, Toby Fox is also interested in creating an official sequel. Aside from games actually called Mother 4 though, many games Nintendo's made since then have been considered spiritual successors to the series in one form or another, including the aforementioned Pokemon and Animal Crossing games. Itoi has stated high reasoning for not creating a fourth installment is due to essentially a lack of motivation. His initial reasoning for the series was to connect with his daughter, and though he wanted to make the other two, that emotional drive lessened and lessened, and with his daughter having grown up by the time Mother 3 released, he definitively saw no reason to carry the series on. He's also concerned it'd become a cash grab series if he continued without the drive to do so. Among big-time pop stars, if they, put out 10 albums, around the 4th album, they can't make very good songs. The albums sell, but everyone at the concerts wants to hear songs from the first 3 albums. Everyone. Though the concept of anti-piracy measures have become a popular meme the last few years, EarthBound possibly did many of the trollish ideas for real. EarthBound has several points where it checks to make sure the game is not being pirated, and if it is, will do everything it can to make the game as unenjoyable as possible. The simplest one is that if the game is being played on a PAL console, a screen reading, "This game is not designed for your Super Famicom or Super NES" will appear. If the game is hacked to bypass the screen, certain areas will cause the game to just crash. One of the more interesting consequences is spawning far more enemies onto the overworld, both making the player have to constantly stop to fight and slowing the game down. The meanest one of them all though is that if the player makes it through the harder version of the game and reaches the final boss, the game will purposely freeze, forcing the player to reset. After doing this, the game will have erased all of the player's save data. The first Mother game also has anti-piracy measures, but it's much less interesting, just a single screen. Funnily, however, the Mother 3 fan translation also has measures to this. If the disclaimer screen is altered in any way, the game will just spit out garbage text, making the translation completely worthless. And if the game is hacked to bypass it, the game will just crash. This was implemented to prevent bootleggers from bypassing it, as opposed to just deterring pirates.
Starman.net is the oldest EarthBound fan site and is still online to this day. The site hosted fan contests, showcases, and forums, where many of the most notable Mother community members originated from. The site was founded by Reed Young, who went on to create the company Fangamer, and Clyde Mandelin, the professional translator and localizer in the late 1990s. Though the site's seen a decline over the past couple decades, it still remains as one of the most well-known and beloved Mother fan hubs. In the late 2000s, Mandelin went on to create the site EarthBound Central, which consisted of blog posts regarding the series' development, news, and fan projects. I say consisted, as since early 2023, the site's unfortunately been down, now only accessible through the Internet Archive. Since the 2010s, many have pursued creating independent films on both the Mother series and fandom. The most well-known of these is EarthBound USA, a documentary on the creation of Starman.net and its creators. This documentary took more than 10 years to complete and was eventually released in late 2023. The film also features an interview with Shigesato Itoi himself. The documentary Mother to Earth on Mother 1's development and The Mother We Share have also been produced. Fans have also taken to making retrospective documentaries of the games, such as We Are Mother and The Story of Mother. Queen Mary is the ruler of Magicant in EarthBound Beginnings and requests that Nintendo recover the 8 melodies so that she can remember her song. She remains in her castle for most of the game. Queen Mary, however, is actually Nintendo's paternal great-grandmother, Maria, who was abducted by aliens in the 1910s. She remembers her true identity upon hearing the completed melody at the end of the game. also remembering the melodies were her lullaby for Gyug. The game also prevents the player from naming any of the other characters Mary for clarity reasons. In the original version of Mother, Lloyd's name is Roido, which is a play on the Japanese term Raido Megane, which means round glasses with plastic rims. This pun not translating well led to many considering the spelling of his name to be L-O-I-D for many years, and is still occasionally used now. However, since 2008, L-L-O-Y-D has been the canonical spelling, as it appears in the stickers for Super Smash Bros. Brawl, which also canonized Nintendo's name. Coincidentally, Lloyd means grey in Welsh, the same color as his hair. Many have pointed out the similarities between Mother 3 and the Evangelion series. These similarities include both protagonists losing their mothers to technology, both are young children, Shinji's personality is quite similar to Lucas's pre-time skip, both are accompanied by tomboys, both boys' fathers largely ignore them while coping with the losses of their wives, some thematic overlap, and both experience frightening hallucinations of their friends and families belittling and challenging them. Many draw parallels between the two franchises' endings though. Both endings involve the protagonists recreating the world to their liking through a concentrated godlike being by their actions, and both end on vague and interpretive notes. An interesting official connection between them, however, is that mock pizza from EarthBound is referenced in the anime, so perhaps these aren't as coincidental as they might initially seem. The Piggy Jelly and Peanut Cheese Bar are two healing items in EarthBound, with the former one being one of the best in the game at that, restoring 300 HP, with a sprig of parsley doubling its effect. They seem to be some sort of play on peanut butter and jelly, but in general peanut butter is not all that popular in Japan. However, there's more to this. In Mother 2, the peanut cheese bar is called the Almond Monaka, a Japanese dessert that consists of a bean paste sandwiched between two wafers. The piggy jelly is the pig yokan, a yokan being a red bean jelly paste made into a block that's eaten in slices. So it seems for some reason the localization team decided to turn these two desserts into a peanut butter and jelly thing, probably due to the desserts not being common in America, similar to how the strawberry tofu was changed to the trout yogurt in Fourside. EarthBound is an anomaly. An apparent MS Paint drawing of Ness and BuzzBuzz, the image was originally posted on Starman.net by Daniel Ness's ally in October of 2007. This image was later taken and used as the de facto album art for a fan song that traces all the way back to 2000, affectionately known as EarthBound.
EarthBound, EarthBound, EarthBound.
Very little is known about the song's origin other than that, but many have said around the time that a young boy named Eric joined Starman.net, posted the song, then promptly left the site. Back then, the fan music section of the site had only just been introduced, and according to Tomato, sadly the rumor of him posting it then ghosting it is false, and that Eric supposedly hung around the site for a while. It's mainly stuck around as a staple of the fandom due to its so bad it's good nature, and has been sung at numerous Starman.net and fangamer meetups and conventions.
Though Mother 1 is 100% not based on true events, some have drawn parallels between George and Maria's abduction and some real tales of alleged alien abductions. This spurs from the game's inclusion of folklore like Bigfoot as well. It doesn't seem a specific alien story has been cited as being a possible influence, but it brings to mind the Roswell, New Mexico alien hoax from 1947. Though George and Maria's incident takes place in the 1910s, the similar UFO imagery used in the discovered disc and the cover-up nature seems to have some connections. And the book that popularized the alien conspiracy theory surrounding it, The Roswell Incident, was published in 1980, the same decade Mother 1 was developed and released, and seeing as Itoi is a big reader, it's more than likely he had read it or was at least familiar. Clean Duster is a fan name given to the first design for Duster ever shown off, used from late 1996 to early 1997, before being replaced by a redesign for the character. This design of the character is widely regarded to be particularly goofy thanks to his large nose and dopey expressions, but holds a place in the heart of EarthBound 64 fans. The clean part of his name refers to how, compared to a lot of other EarthBound 64 promo images available online at the time, this render of Duster is in relatively clean quality, most of the time. Did you know this version of Duster holds the accolade of being the first ever piece of fan art of Duster? Truly beautiful. Shogo Sakai is the composer for Mother 3 and was brought on to compose after the composers for the first two Mother games, Keiichi Suzuki and Hirokazu Tanaka, were unavailable for the job. As the Nintendo 64 version of Mother 3 was being developed by HAL Laboratory, Sakai was a logical addition to the team, as he was already a HAL employee. After EarthBound 64's cancellation and revival for the GBA was underway, Sakai's compositions for EarthBound 64 were reused for the new version of the game, despite the change in developers from HAL to 1UP Studios. Sakai also composed new music for the GBA Mother 3 in scenarios where it was requested, but tried to reuse as much as possible due to budgetary reasons. If you've ever wondered why the music copyright for Mother 3 is partially owned by HAL, that's why. Another fun fact, like Mother 1, there was a promotional album called Mother 3 Plus that Shogo Sakai put together that I would highly recommend checking out. Although unlike Mother 1's, this one's only got one vocal track, and it isn't in English.
Super Smash Bros. Melee originally planned on replacing Ness as a playable character with Lucas, according to Masahiro Sakurai on Melee's official website. This would have given Ness the status of being the first ever character in a Smash game to not return from the previous installment. Due to EarthBound 64's cancellation, this of course did not come to fruition, and Ness remained playable in Melee, with Lucas joining Smash in the next installment, now alongside Ness rather than replacing him. Interestingly, almost the inverse ended up happening with Smash 4, where Lucas was initially cut and Mother was solely represented by Ness, before being added back via a DLC. The logo used by a lot of Mother 3 fans for various things, such as uploads of the game's soundtrack on YouTube, is actually not the official game's logo, but instead a fan-made one. While it is close enough to the original that most wouldn't notice under normal circumstances, comparing the two logos shows that it's not a one-to-one recreation. Look at how those two different 3s look, for example. EarthBound Sagas, then later just EarthBound Saga, was a web series started in 2006, technically 1995, that entailed an episodic live-action retelling of EarthBound. The series was made by Yubsei Movies, and is 4 chapters long, and covers the game up until Ness and Paula reach Threed. It's interesting to see each episode get better than the last, and I would go as far to say that this series is considered a cult classic for the fandom. Fangamer sells the complete series on DVD as well. The whole series has a very backyard type vibe, and the series even claims itself to be a Sunday movie, like the kind of thing you and your friends might make the morning after a sleepover or something. It feels very encapsulating of that time frame in the Mother fandom, and still holds a special place in many's hearts. Brittany, PSI Paula 4, is a now retired Mother fandom member who was one of the first to be a YouTuber specializing in EarthBound related content, most well known for her series, The Insane EarthBound Adventures, which were essentially a series of comedic comic books of the 3 Mother protagonists going on little adventures. Sadly, the original 10 episodes seem to be lost media as of now, with PSI Paula having deleted them from her channel and not having backups. She did, however, remake the first 9 episodes later, and the series had a total run of 74 episodes. She was also a longtime user of Starmen.net, going all the way back to 2008. From 2009 to 2010, she also went on to create the Mother Saga, which was a tribute to EarthBound sagas, but instead covering Mother 1, and it ran for 13 episodes. She's also known for creating the fan-made PSI ability, PK Techno, which was designed as Nintendo's favourite thing, PSI. This was chosen as his to 1, give him a signature ability, and 2, because it's music-themed, much like Ness's Rockin' and, I guess, Lucas's Love. She stated she chose techno because she believed it was the most popular genre of music in the 80s when EarthBound Beginnings takes place. Ardwick of Onenet, also known just as Ardwick, and by his name Leo, is an animator, filmmaker, and let's player who created EarthBound Animated. It was a series that only ran 2 episodes, plus a proof-of-concept pilot, but nonetheless left a deep impact on the community. The series, albeit short, was very positively received, but didn't go any further for a plethora of reasons, such as difficulties with the series' actors, him being the lone animator, and life stuff. His animation work is impressive to say the least, and he also did Let's Plays for some time, mostly of Minecraft. He now does his own personal art and a comic series. It's a real shame the series didn't make it very far because it looked very promising and even now is still some of the highest quality fan animation the community has seen, but it's also very fair to say both the workload itself and unbearable weight of crushing expectations also may have doomed it from the start. Upon gaining control of the fourth and final party member in Mother 2, you are given a short section that introduces what kind of person he is and where he is from, similar to Jeff earlier in the game. And as with Jeff, you have to complete a minor objective before you can join back up with your main party. For Pooh, this means engaging in Moo training. Moo means nothing in Japanese, and is likely supposed to be a riff on concepts like ki, that hold importance in Eastern culture, philosophy, and theology, such as similarities to Buddhist ideals of letting go of mortal and matter in search of a higher state of being. While undergoing his training, Pooh is assaulted by visions that attempt to challenge his resolve to see it through, first a messenger claiming to be coming to collect him on behalf of his master, and then by the illusion of his body being destroyed piece by piece until nothing is left, not even his consciousness, thus achieving true Moo. After Pooh succeeds through the trial, he is granted access to Teleport Beta and joins up with Ness and friends.
One of the most noteworthy differences between Mother 2 and EarthBound is Ness's appearance in Magicant, where he's in his pajamas from the beginning of the game in EarthBound. He rocks nothing in the original. This is purely a change based on cultural perceptions of nudity, and especially ones dealing with children. I won't be going too deep into this topic here, as I've already done an entire video on this subject, which is linked via this card here. Main takeaway, Ness is naked, and this NPC even outright calls Ness a pervert for doing so. For some reason, there's a warp in the outer bounds of Club Titty-Boo that when interacted with will warp the player to Alex's cabin with a unique sunset background not seen anywhere else during gameplay. Similarly, if the player has the walk through walls cheat on, at the start of Chapter 2 as Duster, the player will also see this backdrop. When coming here via the Titty-Boo warp though, the player's inventory will be filled with some random unused items. Some speculate this may have had some purpose in the prologue, possibly when Hanawa sends her letter to Flint, but regardless, it's a shame such a beautiful map is never seen by a player during the course of the regular game. Kindness is the name of a stat that seemed to have some sort of significance in Mother 3, before having a heavily reduced effect in the final game. During the rare instances of the text, you felt something warm inside your heart showing up in the game. Your kindness stat will go up by 1 point for your party, which will then increase the healing capabilities by both items and life up by 1%. It is believed that kindness was to have a much deeper effect on the game at some point during development, but nothing is known for certain. The cut roll of the kindness stat is believed to have related in some way to Consider, an unused battle option which has no function left over in the game's files. Seeing as the kindness stat has also been confirmed to have existed in EarthBound 64, which also had an ability to speak to enemies during battle, it is possible that your interactions, or rather your considerations with enemies, could have affected your kindness stat. But we may never learn the truth of these mechanics' significance until a Mother 3 prototype surfaces someday. Among the abundance of unused content in Mother 3 are back sprites for some bosses. One of the most well-known of these is the Steel Mecharillas, which many find quite humorous. But there are also unused back sprites for the Strawberry Slime, the Cactus Wolf, the Forlorn Junk Heap, the Surprise Box, the Almost Mecha Lion, Master Eddie, and the Firefly. These likely go unused due to the effectiveness of the Siren Beetle being nuked for these fights, and their complete absence from the battle memory probably supports this as well. Yet again, just another example of some perfectly good art being for all intents and purposes wasted. An interesting one that's also categorized as a back sprite is the Unmasked Masked Man, though this one more so goes unused due to the player not being able to actually obtain either of the true final boss's sprites for the battle memory. The Fierce Pork Trooper also has one, but it's just his regular one flipped, and some unused enemies like the Alkaline Man and Tiny Forest also go, as you would expect, unused. Also within Mother 3's files is an unused menu consisting of descriptions of gameplay and lore elements. Many of these memos describe all sorts of things that changed during development, or didn't even end up in the final game, such as apparently it took longer for your whole party to crouch before dashing, and the completely cut coupon mechanic. What stands out among all of the memos though is a description for something titled Bird of Light, something not found in the final game whatsoever. It is described to be the antithesis to the game's Dark Dragon, which would explain some of the symbolism in the game, such as in the Prayer Sanctuary. Despite that, it's unknown how exactly the Bird of Light would have fit into the story of the game, but it is theorized that the Bird of Light is related to the Egg of Light in some way. Perhaps the Egg of Light was laid by the Bird of Light,
In the original version of Mother, there's an NPC at Twinkle Elementary who will ask Ninten if he's played Dragon Quest IV yet, which was not out yet at the time of the game's release. But this wasn't some elaborate foreshadowing on Itoi's part. It was a joke about the series' massive success in Japan feasibly yielding many more sequels. When the game was localized into English, the spirit of the joke was kept intact, but rewritten to avoid mentioning Dragon Quest specifically, as it's not a Nintendo property. So in EarthBound Beginnings, this line was changed from mentioning a Dragon Quest IV to Super Mario Bros. 7, which wasn't actually that far out at the time, given 1990 saw the release of Super Mario World, being number 5 or 6 depending on if you count the two Super Mario Bros. 2s separately. In both cases though, the boy admits to not having reached said games himself yet, as he's still stuck on either Dragon Quest III or Super Mario Bros. 3, and in Mother 1+2, the line is just rewritten all around to not mention any specific game series. At the beginning of Mother 1, the game details Maria and George's abduction, and that later, George returns on his own and begins studies in PSI. What happened in between is also very interesting though, as they were abducted for the purpose of nurturing and parenting Geek. George, however, was much more interested in the aliens' technology, while Maria handled nurturing duty. The situation was a forced trade between the aliens and humans, with the humans sharing love with them, while the aliens shared some of their knowledge of PSI with them. George's observations and studying of their ways and tech led to him knowing a lot more than they would have liked. When he had the opportunity, he fled the mothership and got back on Earth. This is when he commenced his own studies into PSI and how it started to spread throughout the world. George effectively stole PSI from Gygas's race, but to be fair, they did abduct him. Gygas himself was sent to Earth later to retrieve the stolen information regarding PSI, which is why the aliens are invading. George's actions are revealed by Geek himself during the final boss battle. This is less an explanation and more just questions and observations on what the Lost Underworld even is. Why are there dinosaurs here? What is this thing? And why is there a cave here leading to the Cave of the Present? While definitely memorable, it's also one of the strangest locations in the series. The layout of the Cave of the Present is also very different in the past and shows the Lost Underworld must have formed far after, as even the cave that connects the two is completely absent. Along with all of this, the player's guide, which is considered canon to the American version, has images of the Lost Underworld that clearly show that there is both a sky and a large source of light down there. Truly it is the Ice Age 3, Dawn of the Dinosaurs, of EarthBound. The Apple of Enlightenment, known as the Apple of Wisdom in Mother 2, is a machine used by Gygas to predict the future. It tells of a prophecy that a boy, Ness, will prevent Gygas' plans from taking place. The prophecy is first introduced by BuzzBuzz, who explains it to Ness and mentions that it has been handed down by the Apple as a legend since ancient times. It is speculated that the Apple Kid has ties to the Apple of Enlightenment, both due to their names and the Apple Kid being kidnapped by the Starmen. The two juxtapose one another in a seemingly meaningful way, as both have connections to technology as well. The Starman Deluxe at Stonehenge Base indicates Gygas did not believe in the prophecy, which is why Gygas doesn't just immediately target Ness, Jeff, or Pooh. Paula was likely targeted due to her public use of PSI, not necessarily because of the prophecy. The machine itself is shrouded in a lot of mystery, as we're not really sure if it's even seen by the player or not. What the player approaches in Gygas' lair is referred to as the Devil's Machine, which seems to be something else that exists for the purpose of containing Gygas.
So as you may know, the doorknob that gets pulled off the door to the twins' house at the beginning of Mother 3 is a running gag throughout the game that can be found showing up in various places. It is speculated that it has some sort of deeper unspoken significance, however, particularly that it symbolizes Hinawa, which is to say, it's theorized that the exact moment of when it breaks off the door is when Hinawa is killed. Look, I'm willing to believe some wacky Mother 3 theories, but this is a bit too much of a stretch for me. Regardless, the doorknob can be seen as a reminder of the journey that takes place over the game, as you last see it towards the end of Chapter 8, far from your house you began in during Chapter 1. Despite never seeing release, EarthBound 64 happened to see a few pieces of merchandise available during its development. Firstly are some stickers included in a couple of issues of the Japanese magazine, The 64 Dream, one of a Mr. Saturn render, and later of a promotional render featuring Lucas, Flint, Klaus and Boney, and a few screenshots. Also a phone card featuring a different Mr. Saturn render amongst some other Nintendo characters. The last piece of merchandise is a DCMC t-shirt based on one shown in a promotional image for the game, available in red or black. The shirt was made for developers, but was also given away in a competition set up by 64 Dream. These t-shirts are notoriously some of the rarest and most sought after pieces of Mother series merchandise, and have gone for thousands of dollars online in the very rare instances of them going up for sale. One of the promotional renders released in late 1996 for EarthBound 64 was of a pig mask, or at this point in development, a pig warrior, hanging from a tree. This image was a part of an early era of people speculating on the differences between the tone of N64 and GBA Mother 3s, some particularly coming up with a bit of an out-of-pocket rumour that Flint hung this pig mask himself in a fit of rage. However, if you look at this image just a bit closer, it's shown that the pig mask is only tied there by their arms and not actually dead, very much just an amusing visual gag, in line with the humour present in the final version of Mother 3.
A lot of newcomers to the series get a bit confused by this, so I'm going to set this straight. Gyuk from Mother 1 and Gygus from Mother 2 are the same being. Many have even pointed out the visual similarities between them. The original name of Gyuk as a whole is really a matter of translation, and he still called it in Mother 2. Despite the difference in naming, they are the same. But how did Gyuk go from being a feline-esque alien to a horrifying cosmic demon? Well, we don't know for sure. But what we do know is he gained an uncontrollable amount of power which destroyed his mind and physical body. He lost the ability of rational thinking as well and is unaware of what he is doing. In this state, his only desire is to put an end to the entire universe. Similar to the other X character is X character theories, one proposes that Buzz is actually Ninten. Theory essentially says that Buzz is an alternate version of Ninten from the ruined world of the failed future in an artificial body. This is drawn from Gyuk telling Ness he has abilities worthy of a, quote, lowly insect, and Starman Jr. outright says Buzz thus far has been successful in foiling Gygus' plans, as well as saying, you're no longer a hero, just a useless insect, possibly suggesting he wasn't always a bug. But this could also be interpreted as him saying Buzz will no longer be a standout among his kind. It's also noted that Buzz does not have any offensive PSI, only shields, like Ninten. Some also pointed out that Buzz is also knowledgeable on the concepts of melodies and magicant, like Ninten would be. In the Japanese manual for Mother 2, artwork shows that the Sound Stone is a spiraled-shaped piece of rock, implying it's a piece of one of the XX-marked spiral rocks Ninten used to trap the magicant in the first game. And to top all this off, his opening line is, a bee I am. Not. See? He's not a bee. Or a rhinoceros beetle. Whatever. I see where people come from with all this, but to me it seems pretty clear he's saying he's more than meets the eye. Of all of these character theories though, I'd also say this is one of the more compelling ones. While Mother was localized as EarthBound with a space, going as far back as the prototype of EarthBound beginnings back in 1990, Nintendo of America did apparently explore keeping the original title, as seen in this image of an early version of a possible logo for the series. Nintendo of America also toyed with calling the series Spacebound. When exploring names for localization, Nintendo officially pursued the trademark EarthBound with a space between the words, so yes, this confirms the official title for the game would have technically been the one on the side of the SNES cartridge for Mother 2. Think about that. The application was abandoned, however, presumably after they bailed on releasing EarthBound Zero in the West. An application for the aforementioned Spacebound was also abandoned on the same day.
Gintama is a manga and anime series created by Hideaki Sorachi that ran for 16 years between 2003 and 2019. It's mostly a comedic shonen series following the exploits of 3 freelancers living 2 decades after aliens invaded what was previously Edo period Japan, thus creating an alternate history where the isolation was ended by forced occupation from space invaders who also introduced modern technology 150 years sooner than real life. The protagonist, Gintoki Sakata, is an airheaded goof-off with incredible strength and skill as a samurai. His sidekick Shinpachi Shimura is heir to a samurai legacy and tries unsuccessfully at being the rational member of the group. And third is a young, albeit powerful, alien girl known simply as Kagura. The writing of the series relies heavily on how these 3 archetypes interact, while the overarching narrative is conveyed as a B-plot to each chapter's hijinks. A little past halfway through the series, in chapter 416, they try to draft an ad for their business, the Yodozuya, literally store of 10,000 businesses, and the chapter is full of reference to Japanese pop culture, relying especially hard on making jokes about Shigesato Itoi, Mother, and his large and forward-facing nostrils. Gintoki repeatedly tries to rip off Mother 1's marketing, much to the dismay of Shinpachi. It feels like an insane game of telephone as they keep steering themselves further and further away from the plot. After several pages of Mother parody, digs at Itoi's nose, and general bickering, the chapter ends with them finally getting an ad for their business, a group photo of the 3 smiling together. In Mother 1, there's a town called Reindeer, and you may not have heard of it, and that's because it's pretty pointless all around. It's almost entirely optional. I say almost because it's where you have to go to get Anna's hat, which is in the train station, so you don't even have to leave the building. And it's still optional even then because Anna herself is not required to beat the game. The only real thing that's somewhat notable about it is the old man who you can return the dentures to, and he'll give you a ton of mouthwash, which functions as cold remedy. Many manuals and guidebooks were produced for Mother 1 in Japan, and their quality was inconsistent to say the least. One of the most notable of these is the Certain Victory Guide, which is known for its many illustrations of moments from the game. While they're cute and capture the tone the game was going for, this illustration of Nintendo has gone down in the Mother fandom as a particularly interesting one. You see, this was before Nintendo really cared a ton about protecting their IPs, so weird off-the-wall stuff with characters just not acting like themselves or things being inconsistent just mattered a lot less.
The Mother 3 Times were a set of articles featured within the Japanese magazine Dengeki Nintendo 64, currently being published still as just Dengeki Nintendo. The Mother 3 Times were published from 1997 to 1999 and amassed 23 total volumes. These articles have gone on to provide a huge amount of otherwise unknown information about EarthBound 64, covering things such as development updates, story details, and character info, as well as images of the game not published anywhere else. Very much a way to help build hype for the game before its release, but in hindsight, an unfortunate reminder as to the ambition that went into this game that we still can't play in its original form. Buzzbound is a creepypasta-esque video found by the YouTube channel Lumpy Touch in mid-2022. The video suggests itself as a found footage video of a cancelled EarthBound prequel that includes gory and other horrific imagery throughout as the player takes control of Buzz, trying to get him to the past when he meets Ness. The video harkens back to old creepy internet videos like the Ben Drowned series. It became a popular video for reactors to cover as well. This channel is known for its horror content, most famously their series on Game Boy Garfield. Found within block 170 of Mother 3's script is an unused line for a deleted NPC that would have been found in Mayor Push's house. All the line says is, "I'm the producer for Mr. Perkle and Miss Lardner's Love Nest." Mr. Perkle is of course the mayor of Wonnet in EarthBound, B.H. Perkle, and Miss Lardner is the mother of Porky, Lardner Minch. I won't go on about this entry for too long to save you having to imagine the terrifying visual of what that film could have looked like, but it's worth mentioning that during the development of the N64 version of the game, there were both characters named Perkle, that being PK Perkle, the mayor of Tasmilly, and a Lardner too, that has no resemblance to Porky's mother. One of the themes found within Mother 3's story that's discussed commonly by fans is a perceived undercurrent of neglect and abuse. In particular, that in the time after Hinawa's death and Klaus's disappearance, that Flint becomes neglectful towards Lucas. The abuse part's context is that during the mushroom trip sequence on Thane Island, one of Lucas's hallucinations of his father is that Flint is gonna beat him. Daddy's gonna beat you. Of course, seeing this as more than just a culmination of Lucas's paranoia coming from Flint's outlash during the campfire scene 3 years prior, would be picking and choosing what has deeper meaning from the Thane trip. It's difficult to take this dialogue as literal when there's also hallucinations of Salsa speaking and Kumatora being called a stick. In other words, these hallucinations are just the character's deepest fears, and delving into the player's mind in that it reflects their worst nightmares. The idea of Flint actually abusing his son is pretty much only speculation. As for the neglect part, the main source of this information comes from Tasmilly Village's account of where Flint is, that he supposedly looks for Klaus every day. But keep in mind these are the same villagers deriding Lucas for being a nuisance. Their views are very much full of bias and warped via the Pig Mask's influence. It is also worth noting that when looking at a November 2015 interview with Mystery Toy, the motivation for Flint searching for Klaus comes from a place of wanting to protect his missing son. Nowhere does he state Flint was doing what he did from obsessiveness or forgetting about Lucas's well-being, and this is reflected in the game with Flint's sheep still positively speaking about Flint, tending to them, even after the 3 years. While Flint's response to his grief is questionable, he is in a lose-lose situation. Do you accept Klaus is gone and when he might still very well be out there in need of help, or do you keep searching? Would giving up on Klaus being out there not be in turn neglecting him instead?
Mother 3 has a lot of unused content, and some of the most talked about of it are the unused battle backgrounds for the final boss. They're a source of major speculation, so I'd like to preface this section with this. We do not know anything concrete about these assets' original intended purpose. Some of the popular theories surrounding them are, they were a representation of how Lucas saw Klaus while he was still the masked man. The background was an original asset that was meant to be used for the final battle instead of the reused Ness's Nightmare one, or even a possible third battle that ended up being cut entirely. Using cheats, the battles can still be accessed. These backgrounds show a deformed robotic version of Klaus, a gold angel of some sort, a naked Klaus, Klaus clothed, both twins, a large screaming Klaus with a different art style, another one as a red outline, and a distorted red screaming face. Many have made comparisons between the last one and Gygas, speculating he was intended to make a return, but as far as we know, Gygas was never an element of Mother 3's story, so this is very unlikely. The names for these enemies and battles are also just garbage data, with names like Clayman, Vapor, Rope Snake, and so on, so there's little to draw from there. Some of the abilities they can use are interesting though, such as a PK Blank, which works similarly to Flash. Some have no abilities at all, and some have levels of PSI that were cut from the final game. These battles also sometimes drop items, like the Silver Dragonfly, Anti-Paralysis, and the Factory Sketch oddly enough. Lots of data in these fights seem to borrow from others, replicating some of their moves, like the Barrier Trio. Something interesting I haven't seen many places mention is when fighting Klaus's red outline form. Defeating it will yield 6,666 experience points, but if PK Love is cast at any point, it instantly dies and yields 6,996 XP instead. The purpose of all these things is still pretty much unknown, even all these years later, but if I had to try to guess, they're probably remnants of the game's original ending from the N64 version, seeing as Itoi said he rewrote the ending to be much nicer than it used to be, saying previously he wanted to betray the player. This one's pretty straightforward, but not taken all that seriously in the fandom. The theory basically goes like this. After Lucas and company fall at the end of Chapter 5, he's at his end, for a lack of better terms. The implication basically becomes in Chapter 6, after Lucas jumps towards Hanawa off the cliff, he actually dies. Very game theory Majora's Mask of them. The theory suggests the remainder of the game is all played in metaphor, and whether Lucas goes to heaven or hell is decided by who pulls the seventh needle. Can you see why this one isn't taken very seriously? Like, what does this all imply about the events before? That the Pigmask army is real, and what? They just go on to eventually take over regardless? And even after, is all of chapters 7 and 8 just purgatory or something? And if so, that renders everything pretty pointless, doesn't it? Like, Porky, Leader's lore dump, the Mr. Saturns and stuff. And why is Klaus there? He's just also in Lucas's consciousness? Or is Purgatory like a real physical place he's traversing, and Klaus is also there because any number of reasons? Also, how can he get high? Gets very Dante's Inferno for some reason.
This one's really out there. Some people have suggested Hayao Miyazaki, the legendary filmmaker behind countless classic Studio Ghibli films, is an uncredited ghostwriter on Mother 3's story. The only basis really is that nature versus man is a prominent theme of the game. That is where the similarities stop. Itoi has said in an interview that he was sort of writing Mother 3's story as he went when directing the original N64 version, and Miyazaki is known for using the same method when creating his films. What Itoi didn't say was that he worked with Miyazaki on the game's scenario. Some probably think this is possible as the two do know each other. As previously mentioned, Itoi voiced the father in Studio Ghibli's Totoro. Overall, one of the biggest reaches in the Mother community and rightfully dismissed by the vast majority. If you thought that last one was ridiculous, get ready, because we can go dumber. This is some every copy of EarthBound is personalized and also haunted for reals tier stuff. And yes, it is exactly what it sounds like, that the NPCs in the Mother games are all actually alive in the game and real people. Just don't ask why real living people living in the ones and zeros of your Famicom card always say the exact same things and never leave the rooms they're in. Lucas is one of the characters that we have the most material for showcasing his redesigns from over the years. Firstly is this concept art showcasing a few facial designs. The A design from here was used in 1996 and shown at Space World 96. However, this design didn't last long, as Shigesato Itoi was reportedly dissatisfied with the design for resembling the art designer Benimaru Ito, with Ito stating, "The previous Lucas looked a lot like me, so all the staff shouted, 'No!' Especially Shigesato Itoi in particular, who shouted, 'No!' So he requested I redesign the main character to something more straightforward. Thus, I completely redesigned him. The poncho-wearing Lucas was replaced with a much sleeker design of Lucas with a fanny pack, or bum bag for the 3.9% of the MonkeyNess audience from the UK. Itoi emphasized that it was important for playable characters to have a spot where they could hold their items, hence why Kumatora has a waist bag and Duster has a backpack. This design lasted from 1997 to 2000. After the game was cancelled and went through revival concepts for the GBA version, a new design for Lucas was made in 2002. This design is the most obscure out of all the designs we know about, as the only time it was shown publicly was in the June 2013 issue of Nintendo Dream, and took until April 2022 to be resurfaced online. This design was abandoned due to Itoi not really feeling the design's fit, so by 2006 a new Lucas was designed that took elements from his 1997 through 2000 design and the previous Mother protagonists.
It is very much a possibility that all the hype around things like music sampling or the game's contents preventing a Mother 3 localization being just a lot of misunderstanding, and the reason it hasn't happened is simply just Nintendo and 1UP Studios not wanting to use the resources on localizing that could be put towards more profitable ventures. Because ultimately, translating a whole RPG is something that costs a lot of money, and Nintendo is a company that while they have billions of dollars in the bank, they don't realistically have the hugest development teams to work on things usually that are seen as I mentioned, less profitable ventures. Among the story changes from EarthBound 64 to the final released version of Mother 3, one of the most notable things is that Flint was to have a more active role in the plot. One particular EarthBound 64 piece of material with Flint we have access to is a clip of footage from Space World 99 showing Lucas, Flint, Duster and Boney escaping a facility by grabbing onto an airship, all but confirmed to be for the same scene from the end of Chapter 5, but with Flint there instead of Kumatora. Delving into unused GBA content reveals that Flint was absolutely playable in both Chapters 4 and 5 originally, but once again this was changed in the final release of the game. But why? The only reason ever given officially is from a 2015 interview with Mystery Toy mentioned before, the same one that explains Flint's motivations during the final game as discussed earlier. Mystery Toy revealed that during the GBA version's development, a staff member had a child and became a father, which caused them to become particularly attached to Flint, and said that if they were to lose their child, they would search for them every day, causing Mystery Toy to reconsider Flint's role and leading Flint to being off-screen for most of the game. Cognitive Dissonance is a fan game that takes place between Mother 1 and 2. It was directed and created by Handish 2000, also known as Other Hand, in 2009. It tells the story of a group of aliens attempting to keep the Apple of Enlightenment out of Gygas's hands. It was created in RPG Maker 2000 and is celebrated by the community as one of the best Mother fan games, as well as one of the few completed ones. The game's cast is made up of mainly original characters, and many have become beloved by the community since.
A long-time research topic in the community, many are very intrigued by the identities of the actors for Ninten, Anna, and Lloyd in the original Japanese commercial for Mother 1. And although the Mother Encyclopedia discusses the making of the commercial, their identities are not discussed in it at all. They've been a fascination of the community for some time, and although we came close to finding one, it didn't work out. Dating back to May of 2003, a user by the name JavaMan22 posted online that his coworker was a child model in Japan who did some work for the game's commercial. Other users quickly sent along the commercial to make sure, and JavaMan seemed pretty certain. He said when he asked his coworker about the experience, he responded with, "We just stood around the dessert, and then they added a bunch of animation later." JavaMan then left his email and promptly left the forum and never responded to any messages after that. The madman. And yeah, that's as close as we ever got. Nothing else to report. The Notebook, The Proof, and The Third Lie are a trilogy of novellas written by Hungarian author Agota Christoph. The novels are very well known as serving as a huge inspiration for the story of Mother 3, even down to the two main characters being named Lucas and Klaus. I'm not going to get too knee-deep into its contents because 1, it's quite disturbing, and 2, I want to do a whole video on them in the future. What you need to know is the names and that Itoi described the novels as almost feeling like an RPG, due to its violent and gruesome nature in regards to how the boys grow stronger. The first of the trilogy was adapted into a film in 2013 that was pretty well received, as well as into a stage play. Today, the novel is known for its connections to Mother 3, but if you can stomach it, I would honestly recommend checking it out. Honestly, one of the best books I've ever read. Many know that Ness and Paula's papier-mâché models, yes, that's right, they're not clay, were redesigned when the game was brought over to the States. But what many don't know is that they're not real. The original models were just manipulated in photo editing software. This was likely done to make them appear older. In fact, they both were also aged up from 12 to 13, which was probably done to make them seem cooler and appear as such to players as to not seem too juvenile. As revealed in an E3 1997 interview, one of the big inspirations for Mother 3 on the N64 was Toy Story.
You are a toy!
No kidding. The story goes that Mr. Ito and Mr. Miyamoto watched Toy Story together, and afterwards discussed how the movie set the standard for using 3D graphics to tell a story in a movie, but that the precedent had yet to be set for 3D games with movie-like levels of grandeur. Their aim was for EarthBound 64 to set this standard. Beyond that, several character designs were more or less inspired by ones from Toy Story, the major one being that the game's chimeras were inspired by Sid's mutant toys, but some other inspirations can be seen with Hanawa resembling Bo Peep, Flint resembling Woody, the Dragos resembling Rex, and of course Boney resembling Slinky Dog.
Mother 3 began development immediately after the conclusion of Mother 2's development cycle. Seeing as it was still 1994 at this point and the N64 was still a ways away, this early period was conceived for the SNES. It's unknown exactly how far this version got into development, but according to Mystery Toy, this version of the game was scrapped halfway through, with no further explanation as to what he meant by this. One of the most discussed aspects of how Mother 3's story changed over time is the ending. Itoy has given some detail about what the ending to the game was going to be like back during EarthBound 64's development, being that the ending would, quote, betray the players, with considerations being made that there would be possibly no dialogue involved. He emphasized that this ending was, quote, beyond tears, and also the very end would be like, quote, seeing the morning light after staying up through the pitch black of night. When you look at all this information we do have on the original ending, a lot of this sounds like the final game's ending, what with the beyond tears and white light after a pitch black night. It is largely speculated that the original ending didn't include the segment of the player being thanked by the characters for the world being saved, but that is still to be properly confirmed. That being said, while most of the ending did not change content-wise, it was to be directed in a way where it felt as if the characters questioned if there was any hope to begin with. This kind of victory snatched from the deepest pit of despair writing is somewhat common in Japanese media, as seen in anime like Gurren Lagann or movies like Godzilla. Mother 3's ending is unconventional to say the least. It's very vague and intentionally so, wanting the player to draw their own conclusions about the world and characters' fates. This has led to a somewhat popular fan theory that the part of the ending in which the cast talks directly to the player is the afterlife. The world may have been destroyed or altered into a shape so unfamiliar and alien that life simply no longer exists in it, and thus the entire surviving cast of Mother 3 would find themselves together moving into the next life. As one might expect, there isn't a whole ton to go off of in trying to prove or disprove this theory, although Porky still being the absolutely safe capsule in this new world makes it seem unlikely that the physical world has been destroyed. Regardless, Itoy wanted the ending to be up for interpretation, so there's no reason not to believe it if you like the theory. Revealed in a 1997 interview with Mystery Toy, Mother 3 for N64 was to take place over 12 chapters. However, by 2000 it was revealed that the 12-chapter structure had been cut down to only 9 chapters. Despite this, Mystery Iwata insisted that it was only 7 chapters technically. Now what did he mean by that? Well, looking at the final released game, there's 7 full chapters with 2 mini-chapters, being the prologue and chapter 6, hence the technically. So it's likely that had EarthBound 64 been completed by 2001 or so, it would have had the same amount of chapters present in the GBA game, with similar structure and content. But what about that 12-chapter proposal? What were those extra chapters? While very much unconfirmed, it's possible the Needle Hunt was to take place over a longer period of time, spanning over multiple chapters instead of just chapters 7 and 8. But who knows?
When Mother 1 released in Japan, an orchestrated OST was also released as well, with many of the songs from the game having lyrics. This makes sense, seeing as Mystery Toy is a lyricist himself. What's interesting about all of this is that all the songs are sung in English. Some of the notable performers on the record are Louise Philippe, St. Paul's Cathedral Choir, Jeb Million, Jeremy Holland-Smith, and Catherine Warwick. The choir can actually be heard in the commercial for the game, as that version of 8 melodies is the same one that appears on the soundtrack. The artist, however, that intrigues many the most is the young woman Catherine Warwick. She sings a few of the tracks, but is most well known for her performance of Pollyanna, I Believe in You. Not a ton is known about her, but here's what we know. Warwick is from London, and after performing on the album, released a single of her own called Marine Boy, which sadly saw little success. Later in 1994, coincidentally the same year Mother 2 released, she came back to the music industry as part of a duo called Those Two Girls and released 2 more singles. Once again, they saw little traction and were unfortunately dropped from their label because of it. Her last professional musical effort was a single she released in 2005 titled Nightlife, Music is the Answer. Since that time, she's been a mysterious figure in the fandom many have tried seeking out, to little success. I'm not trying to dox this woman, so I'm going to be a little vague with details of her current whereabouts. She seems to be doing well, having a degree in music. She was a music teacher for a time, but now works as a professional pianist in high demand with a family. As for the vocal album, for one, it's worth listening to, and second, although planned to be released along with EarthBound for NES, say it with me, it never ended up being released. Ninten's ultimate weapon in EarthBound Beginnings is found near Gygus on Mounty Toy. It's called Hank's Bat, though this is a localization choice. In the original, it's called the Supreme Bat. In the localization, its description reads, "This awesome bat was personally autographed." Although not confirmed, the autograph and namesake seems to be a reference to legendary American baseball player Hank Aaron, who played professionally in the MLB for 23 seasons from 1954 through 1976. A designated hitter, he broke the record for home runs hit that was held by Babe Ruth, and it held for 33 years after. He hit 24 or more home runs every year from 1955 through 1973, and is one of only 2 players to hit 30 or more home runs in a season at least 15 times. Aaron also holds the MLB records for the most career RBIs, extra base hits, and total bases. He has so many more achievements I could list here, but you get the idea. The man was a monster on the field. And for how he ended up here? Well, his abilities were beyond human. I also have some other similar facts I'm just going to put in this section too. Nintendo's a devout fan of the San Francisco Giants baseball team, due to his father once bringing him back a ticket to a Tokyo Giants baseball game after a trip from Japan. So Nintendo just connected the dots. They're like a sister team to San Fran's, which is why they're his favourite. This all comes from the Mother Encyclopedia, by the way, so yes, this is all canon. Mother Encyclopedia, which we'll talk about later, has lots of pictures also of items from EarthBound Beginnings, making it official artwork, but there are a lot of guides for the game that came out in Japan with tons more, and it's all canon. Kirby and Ness just get along, man. In EarthBound, an early version of Kirby's front sprite from Kirby's Dream Course acts as the cursor on the boot up debug menu. Dream Course was released only a month after Mother 2 in Japan, and a team from HAL helped out with the game's programming, so there was some overlap. The 2 series have had quite a bit of that actually, sharing some sound effects as well, and Mr. Saturn even appearing in the Great Cave Offensive. HAL also worked on the Smash Bros. Series, and many of those programmers worked on Mother 2, so they pulled for him to make the cut. Nobuhiro Imagawa very not so subtly ships Kumatora and Duster, as pretty much every piece of Mother 3 art he's done in the time since the release of the game, with the 2 of them in it, will have them blushing, holding hands, and similar. Does only he ship it, or is it something the other devs approve of? Who knows, but worth mentioning that typically most Western fans of Mother 3 aren't really a fan of the ship, which is amusing given this context. While there is no official Mother 3 localization, of course, many of the characters' official localized names have been confirmed through various sources. For example, Duster was confirmed in 1996 via a Nintendo Power issue, Flint was confirmed via an internal Nintendo of America bio for Mother 3 at Space World 99, and probably most interesting is that Yokuba was confirmed in 2021 via official merchandise hosted on Hobonichi Mother Project. Several other characters' official English names were of course confirmed with the release of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, which went on to dictate the names of a couple characters in the Mother 3 fan translation, namely Hinawa and Kumatora. Perhaps Yokuba wouldn't have been renamed to Facade in the fan translation if his official English name had been confirmed at some point before its completion. Only 3 songs from EarthBound 64 were ever released during the development of the game, those being Big Shot's theme in the Space World 99 trailer and Tazmily theme, as well as Battle Part 5, neither of which ended up being used in the GBA game. The Tazmily theme uses the same leitmotif as Monkey's delivery service, and according to the game's composer, was left out of the GBA version due to not being able to find a part of the game where the music could play and be fitting. Battle Part 5 is just an easier version of the battle song, Etude for Ghosts, and while this version isn't in the GBA version, it actually does remain in the game's files. There is a plethora of music that was likely to have been in EarthBound 64 that's present in GBA Mother 3, as well as several songs confirmed to not be in the N64 version, having confirmed to have been made specifically for the GBA version, as well as some tracks straight up confirmed to have been in EarthBound 64, such as Samba de Combo being confirmed in a Mother 3 Times article. Several other interesting tidbits are known about EarthBound 64's music, such as how the organ used in the GBA version is different to the one present in the N64 version, and that reportedly, the music that played during the Space Soul demo while in a pork bean resembled the music present in Mother 1 and 2.
Super Smash Bros. Melee has a couple of textures that actually came from EarthBound 64 originally, as both EarthBound 64 and Melee were developed by HAL Laboratory. The first is a render of Oso Castle used on a few trophy reflections. The second is a sand texture from Tazmily Village, reused here in Melee's Onett stage. And the third is a weather vane seen in a screenshot from 1996, also reused in Melee's Onett stage. It's very possible that even more textures were reused, such as Melee's 4-side stage, but until a prototype surfaces for EarthBound 64, we may never know. Within several of the Mother 3 Times volumes are mentions of family members nowhere to be seen in the GBA version of Mother 3. Firstly is Tobacco, the wife of Lighter and the mother of Fuel. She was 28 years old and reportedly went missing after Lighter's fishing boat, the Hatami Maru, was attacked by a large creature at sea. In addition to this, Nana's father, simply known as Papa, was a 40-year-old sailor who also went missing at sea after taking a sudden voyage. If you've ever wondered why in the GBA version of the game, Nana is almost always standing by the sea watching the horizon, it seems to be actually a remnant of this scrapped subplot. As well as these two is Bar, Butch's 70-year-old grandmother who apparently knits sweaters for the villagers in Tazmily. Benimaru Ito and Nobuhiro Imagawa are the main art designers for the N64 and GBA versions of Mother 3 respectively. Ito was brought on as Mr. Itoi was a huge fan of his work for the Mother 2 manga, which he illustrated. Ito seems to be one of those larger-than-life types of people. His concept art drawn for EarthBound 64 is all immensely interesting. As well as this, we mentioned earlier how the 1996 design of Lucas had to be redesigned as Mr. Itoi thought it looked far too much like Ito himself. But Ionia's N64 design also happens to resemble him too, interestingly. As for Imagawa, he reimagined Mother 3 to visually resemble Mother 2 more, but with a huge upgrade to the way the sprites are animated in comparison to Mother 2. Both presented hugely interesting visions for Mother 3's visuals, and I'm grateful we got to see both of their works for the two versions of the game. Toshinao Aoki was another artist for EarthBound 64. He was the enemy designer who also designed Porky and his spider mech, the Pig Mask, and Newborg City. In the time since the game's cancellation, however, Mr. Aoki has been loosely relevant to the Mother series. He was one of the artists featured in Pollyanna, an official Mother series comic book featuring art and comics from a huge variety of artists. Interestingly, portions of Mr. Aoki's comic feature some of the EarthBound 64 elements he designed. As well as this, Mr. Itoi has spoken very highly of Mr. Aoki's work, as he has said that Mr. Uyama, the art director of Mother 2, as well as Mr. Aoki, really match with the mother inside of me. Another tidbit of information from the E3 1997 interview mentioned earlier is that on the webpage where the interview was hosted, many pieces of concept art were shown off for EarthBound 64. Tragically, the Wayback Machine captcha of the page does not have them backed up. Some had been saved from back then and were available on places like starman.net, but the rest are completely missing from the internet. In an effort to try and find these unavailable concept drawings, effort was put into trying to find if the rest of these images had perhaps been published elsewhere. Eventually, it was found that the October 1997 issue of the 64 Dream had reportedly shared all the concept drawings in an article covering Mother 3. Unfortunately, scans or even just photos of this particular issue weren't available anywhere online either. So, this lead dried up. That was until the 3rd of November 2022 when a Twitter user named 19885 posted photos of the inside of this magazine issue, and we finally got to see all this art, showing many different environments from the game, buildings, and even 1996 Lucas going through a glowing cave.
As revealed by Toshinao Aoki in a 2011 interview, when asked on if he recalled if the Ultimate Chimera was in EarthBound 64, he responded by saying, quote, "I don't remember if there was an Ultimate Chimera in the game, but I did design several chimeras." So this does point towards the Ultimate Chimera having been something created specifically for the GBA version of the game. Perhaps the Chimera Lab sequence would have been presented very differently. You probably are aware that in Mother 1 and 2, should one of your party members run out of HP, they'll become ghosts and float around behind your active party members. However, in Mother 3, this was changed to your party members slumping over and looking exhausted. But in EarthBound 64, this was different. A singular screenshot of Wes reveals that when a party member was to run out of HP, they would become ghosts like before, but now with the addition of the character's limp body laying on the ground too. It would make sense that the reason this was changed is to do with Mother 3's story. Death is a central theme of the game, so having your party members die would feel weird with several plot points revolving around characters who actually do die. Some have drawn some parallels between the two kid inventors and real-life tech lords Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, though the connections are weak at best. Some point out Apple Kid is like Steve Jobs because apples, and some say Orange Kid somehow resembles Bill Gates. That, paired with the fact that they're inventors in competition with each other, is the basis of the whole theory. Can you tell that Mother fans are coping well with the franchise ending? Retro Game TV, also known as Koala, is the owner of the world's largest Mother series merchandise collection. A couple of particular highlights of his collection include both black and red variants of the EarthBound 64 DCMC t-shirts and several localization prototypes for EarthBound Beginnings and EarthBound. Koala was also featured in the Mother to Earth documentary and is actually a personal friend of Itoi. Hinawa is extremely similar to the Japanese word for sunflower, himawari. This on its own is a neat tidbit, but it actually helps reveal something about EarthBound 64. That being, not a single piece of released material for the N64 version of the game showcases anything sunflower related, but seeing as Hinawa's name was revealed in early 1998, this indicates that sunflowers were likely still important in Mother 3 even way back before the GBA version. Hinawa is also a real surname in Japanese and a word that means fuse, which is an interesting, albeit likely unintended coincidence, given her death is the beginning point of Mother 3's overarching plotline.
Something that's been long debated is the nature of the Starmen's existence. It's not entirely clear if they're intended to be robots or organic life forms, or even both. I've heard from many that they're the same race as Gygus, presumably alluding to the squiggly nature of their arms, but I'm yet to find somewhere in the games that corroborates this. The source of the debate really comes from Starman Jr. though, from the beginning of EarthBound. The way he speaks in the original Japanese version is he only uses katakana in his speech, a common trope for how robots speak. The English version, however, sort of forewent this. The common way to translate it would to be in all caps, but instead it was done by adding click and whir throughout his text to make it less obvious, for some reason. The addition of these sound effects makes it seem like they're mechanical, but since these sound effects aren't in the original, they might not. In the original, Starman Jr. is called Son of Starman, and the Ghost of Starman is the ancestor of Starman, making it seem like they're biological. Though it's not confirmed one way or another, the original does seem to very slightly lean towards biology. Some lesser known PSI moves exist outside of the Mother series in the Super Smash Bros. Games. In Smash 4, custom moves were introduced that hardly anybody used. For Ness, this gave him some variations on his PK Flash move, but also moves he previously had no ability to use, like PK Freeze, which, by the way, is very jarring to hear him say. He has some other variations of PK Fire as well, like Bonfire and PK Fire Burst, but for his down special, he was given an entirely unseen move, PK Vacuum, which draws opponents in to hurt them. Lucas, being added after launch, didn't get any. In the story created by the people of the White Ship, Kumatora, just a baby at the time, was designated as being the princess of Osohe Castle. This seems to imply her role was at some point more important to that story, perhaps even in the original version of Mother 3's plot, but somewhere along the way it was relegated back a bit. Her connection to the Magypsies seems to also suggest this, but seeing as Osohe Castle was already in ruins by the time Mother 3's story even starts, It's hard to identify exactly what her larger role in the narrative may have been. A glitch exists in the final version of Mother 3 that released in Japan, as well as many early versions of the fan translation. For some reason, Duster's melody won't randomize during combos like everyone else's, instead only playing his first one over and over again. He actually does have 5 other sounds, they just don't play for whatever reason. This was eventually patched out in version 1.2 of the fan translation.
All things considered, EarthBound works pretty well. It's not abundantly glitchy, and there aren't too many bugs overall. However, there is one specific place in the game that's known for being extraordinarily bugged. That is this section of the circus tent Threed, where the player can just check, known as the Threed tent glitch or the check area glitch. This glitch is pretty unpredictable and can result in some truly strange things happening, even crashing the game sometimes. One possible outcome from it is accessing the debug menu, which can allow the player to do any number of things, and is how many speedruns of the games are able to skip directly to the ending, as you can imagine, saving a lot of time. I'm no good at the programming and all that hip-hop, so from WikiBound, here's an exact explanation for why this glitch occurs. EarthBound's map is actually one large square, and the game uses warp tiles to move the player into different locations, when walking through doors, entering caves, and etc. The spots in the game that are checked and trigger the glitch are along the outer edges of the map, which when checked, the game reads data from outside the map, causing the game to read an arbitrary address in memory. Some have pointed out that the Manny Manny statue battles may have possibly had their palettes incorrectly displayed, though there's no way to confirm. The first battle with it, in Moonside, has it use the normal gold sprite on the overworld, but a purplish one in battle. This is obviously done to demonstrate the evil coming from it, but it bothers many that rule doesn't seem to apply later in Magicant, where on both the overworld and in battle, it's gold. Pretty arbitrary, but it's led to some debate over the intentionality behind this choice. Perhaps the latter's use of gold for both speaks to some thematic meaning, but that's a discussion for another time. In Spokane and EarthBound Beginnings, there's a girl near the center of town who will sell the party hints for $1,000 each. If the player declines at any point or alternatively buys all 3, she disappears. And this isn't like a walk into a house and back out again type thing, she's gone for good and will never come back. Some theorize she's a ghost, some say she was sent by Queen Mary to assist in 10, and others say, well, that was weird, and move on.
The clumsy robot in the Monotoli building can only be defeated by outlasting it until the Runaway 5 burst in and turn it off. The room with it can't be accessed until giving the maid outside the trout yogurt machine from Talarama. Before then, the party's not allowed to go up to the top floor, as the elevator will be blocked off. There exists though an unused cutscene where if the player does encounter the clumsy robot prior to the required story progression, it will unleash black smoke that overwhelms the party and ends the battle early. The party will then be brought back outside of the building. Pippi is a character who joins Ninten briefly at the beginning of Mother 1 after he rescues her from the graveyard. There, he has to uncover her under the correct coffin in the catacombs. If he chooses the wrong one, a battle will be engaged with a zombie enemy. It seems though that there was possibly going to be a fight with Pippi at some point, which may have been when Ninten first uncovers her, perhaps having to sort of beat a possession out of her, or perhaps Ninten was mistaken for a zombie himself. Pippi has a battle sprite drawn for a fight with her, but no color palette will display even though she does have one. She also has intact stats with an absurd amount of PP despite not learning any PSI. One more interesting thing about her is her stats growth rate while she's in the party after rescuing her are identical to Teddy's. Another insane fan theory, some have suggested the possibility that Ninten's father is actually Geeg, though it makes no sense. The main thing that's pointed to is that Ninten has PSI abilities, like Geeg's race, but that doesn't mean they're father and son. For one, Ninten has a human father that you see in the ending of the game. You could say, that's just Gygus in disguise, but why would he even bother disguising as a human and creating hybrid offspring at all? To what end? Geeg makes it clear that he despises humanity and is actively trying to invade and eradicate them. Ninten's father is also the one who sets Ninten out on his adventure to discover his PSI abilities, which leads to the downfall of Gygus. Not to mention, George had no need for alien DNA to begin studying PSI on his own, so there clearly is no need for any special biology to utilize it, and that it also implies several other characters in the series are also part alien if it were true, which makes no sense. Something that's been pointed out is that the first Chimera Dr. Andonuts ever creates is technically Dungeon Man, the megalithic living dungeon you first meet as Brick Road during the Solo Jeff section. This can be seen as somewhat unintentional foreshadowing, or perhaps something that was intentionally used when bringing him back in Mother 3, where he's forced by the Pigmask army to do similar experiments. Dungeon Man is quite the enigma though. You can't help but wonder how Andonuts even achieved this. Back to the whack job theories, Heaven's Gate was a cult in 1997 whose members committed one of the strangest mass suicide events in American history in order to climb aboard an extraterrestrial ship that they believed would help them escape the coming apocalypse and lead them to paradise. They believed the bodies to be mere containers for the soul, and that their ritual suicide would allow a UFO hiding in the trail of the Hale-Bopp comet to pick them up and bring them to the next life. The actual name, Heaven's Gate, was only used for the group's first few years of establishment in the early 1970s, later being renamed to Human Individual Metamorphosis and Total Overcomers Anonymous. Some have drawn parallels to the group's beliefs and the founding of the Nowhere Islands, with the cast of Mother 3 using the white ship to escape the previous world's destruction. It's certainly a stretch, as previous depictions of cults in the series were much more critical of these sorts of groups.
The Lazy Mole is a short story the player can hear in Mother 3. In the mole's minds, there's one mole who will tell the story. It is as follows. Once upon a time, there was a lazy mole who lived in a hole. The mole would never ever dig on his own. Instead, he would stand by holes that others dug and say, "Dig, dig, dig, dig." What happened to the mole, you ask? No, I don't know this story very well. Let's see. And he lived happily ever after. At the end of Mother 1, peace returns to Earth and all the main characters return home. Anna is reunited with her mother who was kidnapped, Lloyd becomes a hero at his school, Ninten returns to his family, and Teddy becomes a daily singer at the live show. The thing is, this is not the original ending to the game, and I'm not talking, oh, the original ending was just an idea that never made it into the game. No, the ending was changed for the game's re-release. The ending showing the conclusions to many characters' stories was added for the English localization, all the way back in the early 90s. The ending was then made canon in the early 2000s when Mother 1+2 revised the ending to be in line with the one created for EarthBound 0. From here, this ending was carried on in every release, but originally in the Famicom version, after beating Gygus, the game would just end. They'd just sort of look at you and the credits would roll. Teddy saw no resolution, implying he likely died after his confrontation on Mountie Toy, making it to this point in time the saddest ending of any piece of media ever. Though bold, this was retconned in favour of a more positive ending, the Depression Pit being saved for Mother 3's. No one really talks about this, but Klaus and Duster both go through very similar events during Mother 3. Both go missing for 3 years, experience amnesia which eventually gets cured, both assume new identities through the influence of a new group they meet, and have heartfelt but bittersweet reunions with their fathers, as well as some other general similarities such as both having lost their mother. Just something to think about. A long debated element of Mother 1 has always been the question, why did Ninten's father call it the end of the game? On the final screen of the game, a picture of Ninten's dad on the phone with the text ending with, "Something new has come up," suggesting some new threat is approaching. This was never explained at any point, and seeing as Mother 2 doesn't end up elaborating on Ninten after the fact, it's been a mystery ever since. Some say it's just him warning Gygus will return, see Mother 2. However, I have a different theory, much more of a depressing one, but I think it's probably true. I think the phone call at the end of EarthBound Beginnings was meant to set up for a sequel, but seeing as Mother 2's story was still being figured out at this point, it was probably assumed that Ninten would return as the main character, but since he wasn't, it ended up rendering this teaser screen pointless and now just confusing. A bummer of a conclusion, but likely true. I mean, look at Mother 2's concept art. That isn't Jeff there, that's Lloyd. During the final battle with Porky in Mother 3, he points out he's unsure of his actual age, only that he could be 1,000 years old or 10,000 years old. With this in mind, it could be said that Mother 3 takes place at least 1,000 years after Mother 2, but it's not actually that clear-cut. A 1997 interview with Benimaru Ito reveals, quote, "Porky didn't die at the end. He escaped to a different era or age. Part of Mother 3 is about him getting older in this era that he hastily escaped to." So what's implied is that Porky aged in a very, very non-conventional way, and his body has severely deteriorated, likely due to this. One thing I've always found interesting is that the game doesn't explicitly say Porky has actually become immortal due to his actions, only that he's warped his age to an indeterminate number due to his interdimensional travelling. could it possibly be that Porky could die due to his deteriorating health, and that would have just motivated him to use the absolutely safe capsule to actually prolong his life forever? Just something that keeps me up at night. What did Porky do refers to an attack Porky has in Mother 3, where during his boss fight the text might just say, "What did Porky do?" and does damage to every party member without any indication of what it is he actually did. It's been wondered for many years now what it is he does here, but there's no way of knowing. It really just seems to almost be a gag of some sort, just a demonstration of just how far gone Porky is from any sort of humanity, to the point his attacks aren't even identifiable. This is also seen in his attack labeled, "Porky did something."
Both Mother and Mother 2 have been infamously adapted into the Mother 2 and Mother 2 novels by Kumi Saori. Another topic I'm saving for a future video, so I'm just going to give a general overview of them for now. They're known for their bizarre liberties taken with both events and the characters, oftentimes having much darker suggestions of what happens and how the protagonists act. This is also where Nintendo's alternative name, Ken, comes from. These novels, along with the adventure book, a choose-your-own-adventure style book, were basically lost media for some time due to their obscurity and state of only being in Japanese until the last few years, when Mother fan Nyasu Nekoban made fan translations for both available online. There were also several manga and mangaka made based on the games, but frankly, these are very scattered in regards to the available information and translations of them. An official Mother comic book titled Pollyanna was released by Hobonichi though, which has a lot of art and vignettes made of the series done by 35 different artists, including Toby Fox. This is yet to be released in English or be fan translated though. Not known by many is that there is an official fifth Mother game. It's just not a video game. Officially released was the Slap Brothers card and dice game, a tabletop EarthBound game, a fully fledged spin-off focused on the Slap Brothers from the Dusty Dunes desert. And when I say this is a Mother game, I mean it, as Shigesato Itoi himself served as a designer for the game. As you can imagine, it's pretty rare and expensive, highly sought after by collectors. Little information is available about the game, but according to BoardGameGeek.com, the rules are: throw the 3 dice and try to win the matching cards. After winning a card, you can bet your cards to get a 4th die and try earning more cards, or lose them. Other players may try to steal your cards, so be careful and protect them with the useful Sombrero card. Beyond being EarthBound branded though, the game actually features new lore for the series, in the form of the long-lost 4th Slap Brother, Sombrero. After this game, he was never seen again, once again by Mother 3 becoming lost. Besides the original vision for Mother 3, another Mother game was cancelled. This one, however, was 1. Never officially in production, and 2. Wasn't conceived by a toy. We don't know the exact timeline of the project other than it was discussed around the summer of 2003, about 2 years after Mother 3's initial cancellation. The project was pitched by Yasuyuki One, director of Baten Kaitos, to Satoru Iwata and Itoi as a game for the GameCube. He wanted the game to have a felt art style, which he did these mock-ups for. Though Itoi reacted positively to the concept artwork, particularly its 1980s America feel, he found it, quote, a little strange, and according to One, he seemed flabbergasted. The gameplay seems to have been planned to resemble EarthBound's, and the game was even planned to star Ness, so it seems it would have been some sort of pseudo-sequel to Mother 2. Speculation, though, has led many to believe it was intended to be a fully fledged remake of Mother 1. Though Itoi ultimately said no to the project, many agree it was at least partially due to his and Shigeru Miyamoto's effort at the time to restart Mother 3's development on the GBA. Mom's Hometown features the love theme leitmotif, most commonly attributed to being in, you guessed it, the love theme, as well as being present in a few other tracks such as Name These Children and It's Over. It's been confirmed by Mr. Itoi that this particular leitmotif was a very late addition to the game. It was December 2005 when I announced on Hobonichi it's almost finished. The love theme didn't even exist yet, but it added a sense of emotion that practically changed some of the actual story. So, with this info in mind, does it mean that the entire song Mom's Hometown wasn't in Mother 3 until this very late point in development? Or is it instead that the song did exist just using a different leitmotif, like maybe the Pig Mask one? Very much a mystery. Infamous internet journalist Daniel Keem, otherwise known as Keemstar from Drama Alert, has in fact played both Mother 2 and 3. In a tweet from February 2020, he said he never got the chance to play it as a kid, so he was going to finally get around to it, along with a picture of him playing the game. He didn't give any updates on his playthrough, but seemingly completed it, as in September 2023, he posted to Twitter once again, this time showing off his glow-in-the-dark analog pocket, as well as the start of the prologue in Mother 3, which, by the way, many misidentified as a Pokemon game.
Yes, the famous 3D physical artwork made for both Mother 1 and 2 are not made from clay like they're often referred to as, but from paper mache as confirmed in the Mother Encyclopedia. These paper mache models were crafted by an artist named Totori, and apparently all the Mother 1 ones took a total of 10 months to create. According to the shop page on Hobonichi Mother Project for the Chosen 4 plush set, the first prototypes for these plushies were made over 10 years before they were finally released. Even when it comes to making merchandise, this series has a really bad habit of taking a long time to make things. Mother 1, specifically the original Famicom version, has a gag cutscene at Twinkle Elementary where the player can buy a time machine from the mysterious teacher for $2,775. When it's bought, the mysterious teacher will explain how it is used, then accidentally activate it, and the party is transported to a destroyed version of the mysterious teacher's room seen after Lloyd blows it up. It's just a joke that wastes the player's money, and in later versions was just replaced with an option to buy a super bomb. If it's hacked into the English version shop data, it can still be bought for the same price, but its functionality was stripped. Using the item in the English version will display "Nothing happened," and using the look command will simply display the text "System error!" Interestingly, the Time Machine's official artwork vaguely resembles the Phase Distorter. As explained in volumes 15 and 16 of the Mother 3 Times, there was to be discourse to occur between members of DCMC during Mother 3. Specifically, what is said is that there was reported danger of the band breaking up, stemming from a misunderstanding between Rodrigo Rodriguez's parents and the other band members. For context, Rodrigo Rodriguez is the real name of one of the band members, with his stage name being Magic Zildjian. The following volume explains Rodrigo's departure from the band, and a call for new members to be recruited. Looking at the other EarthBound 64 DCMC material we have actually corroborates this info from the Mother 3 Times. The first material from 1996 shows Magic as the bass player, and the late 1997 and beyond material shows he went from bass player to the keyboardist, with Duster taking the place of bass player out of the name Lucky. Such foresight they had, huh?
While this is something that was discussed earlier, it is worth clarifying something important. It has been heavily rumoured that it was essentially definitive that for the final battle with the Masked Man in Mother 3, there would be no dialogue whatsoever in the N64 version. However, this more accurately was only a concept they considered for the final battle, and due to evidence explained later in this video, it seems that the final battle in the game did have dialogue, similar to the final GBA version. Mother 3 has a very interesting history with subtitles. It goes back to Mother 2 actually, as that game had a subtitle in Japan, that of course being Geiger Strikes Back, so it was decided that Mother 3 would also have one. During Mother 3's initial reveal in 1996, no subtitle had been decided yet, but by 1997, one had been shown off. Mother 3, Forest of Strange Creatures, had been decided. The game before that was planned to be Mother 3 Chimera Forest, but this couldn't be used due to trademark issues with the word Chimera. This subtitle remained until Spaceworld 99, where the title was now shown to be Mother 3 Fall of the Pig King. This remained as Mother 3's full title up until the game's cancellation, and interestingly, was to still be in the GBA version as late as March 2005, as revealed by internal Nintendo leaks. Sometime after this, the subtitle was dropped for the game, and Mystery Toy actually explained why the final game has no subtitle in his Nintendo Dream interview from July 2006. He says, "The meaning behind a game changes a lot between players. Players add more than half of the meaning and value to games, which is more than any mode of expression. So I feel like that half that you've added is entirely your own. All I did was provide assistance. So keeping that in mind, subtitles have too strong a message that says, I want you to look at it this way. It narrows that world that belongs to the player. My personal feelings steer me to want to affirm everything the player thinks about the game. I wanted to make Mother 3 like a mirror, one that reflects the heart of the player off of the screen." During the Mother 3 to Everyone Who Waited interview released the day of EarthBound 64's cancellation in August 2000, the inevitable question arose of how complete the game got to be before the plug had to be pulled. While the three hosts, Mystery Toy, Mr. Iwata, and Mr. Miyamoto, struggled to say anything definitive, Mr. Iwata eventually said he felt they only reached 30% completion. However, Mr. Miyamoto contested this by stating, "Iwata might think it's around 30%, but I feel like it was at least 60. There are many elements to it, like the compression of the scenarios and the questions along with it. Is the scenario written well? Are the characters ready? Then there's the question of whether the programming fundamentals are even capable of compressing the scenarios yet. Last year, I felt much more overwhelmed by how much underlying programming we had left to finish. It wasn't about how many scenarios were ready. I think the basics of the game have been completed over the past year, and all we had left was data input. All we had to do was create whatever remained, and we'd be good to go. The 30% Iwata is referring to is the length of the overall scenario." Iwata then went on to clarify, "I meant it from the point of view of a player experiencing the game as is, with a completed product at 100%. The at least 60 Miyamoto's referring to is how much of the work was done from a creator's perspective. So in other words, 30% of the complete game was fully playable, and 60% of the work needed to make the game was done, meaning the remaining 40% of development would enable the other 70% of the game to be fully considered playable and polished." But what is even more interesting is what Iwata said after this, that being, "Miyamoto's a very strict guy. Even if you think something's 90% done, he's the one saying, this ain't even halfway done. So if Miyamoto says it was over 60% done, you could assume it was much further along than that. Perhaps they actually got further than 60% of development done? Until the final prototype for the game leaks online, we can never know for sure." You may be able to tell that looking at some of the Mother 3 Times images from Dengeki N64 that a lot of these images weren't actually taken from in-game, as their quality is of a higher degree than what the N64's video signal was capable of outputting. This is because these images were pre-rendered rather than using the N64 hardware, simply using the actual game's models. The easiest way to tell the difference in these pre-rendered EarthBound 64 images versus the images taken on real hardware is that the in-game images feature simple, round shadows for the characters, while these pre-rendered ones are more complex. The more you know. Despite Mother 3 at Space World 99 being a huge showcase of new information and material for the game, for whatever reason, a couple of the images used on the page on the game within the official booklet for the event showcase images previously published within the Mother 3 Times, that being this one image of a Sohei castle that was talked about earlier, and a purple dragon in the Sunshine Forest. Why reuse previously used material? Laziness probably. Oh now this is a doozy. So back in late 2019 or so, it was discovered that footage of Mother 3 at Space Soul 97 was currently lost. Obviously any unseen footage of EarthBound 64 was very highly sought after, so a search for any potential way of finding this footage went underway. This led to a tweet from March 2018 of a Japanese Twitter user conversing with Koala/RetroGameTV, showcasing a Nintendo company report document and CD from 1998, and that there was indeed a trailer for EarthBound 64 on there, only that apparently it was similar or the same as the one that could be found on YouTube, that being the Space World 99 trailer. Seeing as this tweet was found by the community over a year after it had been made, the owner of this report didn't respond to anyone hoping to get clarification as to what this Mother 3 trailer was, and this lead dried up. Almost 2 years passed and there was nothing, until one day, a copy of the same Nintendo company report went up for sale on Yahoo Japan auctions. The wait for the auction to end was nerve-wracking, but miraculously and thankfully was won by a user named Zen64 for $357. The lead up to the arrival of the report and CD was tense. Many believed it might only be the Space World 99 trailer again, due to what that user from earlier had said on Twitter. But it had to be unseen footage from Space World 97, right? Why would a company report from 1998 have a trailer for a game that was shown off in August 1999? That just doesn't add up. And so, when it arrived and was uploaded online, it was indeed footage from the Space World 97 trailer. What a massive W.
The last entry just went over how a portion of the Space World 97 Mother 3 trailer was recovered and preserved. However, that's all it is, a portion. The full trailer is still lost. The trailer on the company report is a condensed version with shortened and missing scenes, only totaling 25 seconds in length. An additional clip from said trailer is actually available, coming from EarthBound 64's coverage at E3 1998, which reportedly reused all the footage previously shown at Space World 97, this clip being of a capybara ramming into Flint. The footage we don't have access to and is still currently lost includes scenes of extended footage of Flint walking through Tazmily Village and then speaking to Tazmily villagers such as Isaac, Flint walking into the Yadu Inn and heading up the stairs to a weapon shop, Lucas riding upon a Drago in the mountains, the DCMC performing with Lucky present, and more footage of Flint battling, going up against a purple dragon. People love lost media hunts, so maybe a very huge effort can finally be made from the wider Mother fanbase to help track down all of this footage. Something that was pretty mysterious for a while was EarthBound 64's Space World 99 NPC dialogue. However, in more recent times, a lot of the dialogue has been documented from various sources. Some examples of dialogue from this demo include an unknown villager saying, quote, "I heard from a Mother commercial that if you drop the M from Mother, you're left with something other, but maybe you should leave the M and add a 3 instead." Beto saying, "You like pigeons? No, not pigeon meat. I mean pigeons as in birds." And a male villager saying, "Is it just me or am I being watched by a huge crowd of people?" Much of this dialogue, as you might be able to tell, was self-referential for the demo's sake and not intended to appear in the final game. Another thing we learned more recently is some information regarding the survey for Mother 3 at Space World 99. For context, game demos playable at Space World 99 would have surveys for players to fill out after playing, in order to gather feedback on how to improve the game before release. For EarthBound 64, in the time between the demo and the game's cancellation, the game's team aimed to improve the visuals and performance of the game, largely based on survey results for people who played the demo. As revealed in an interview with the 64 Dream magazine, Mr. Itoi's favorite character within Mother 3 are the Dragos. He said, "I have a tendency to fall for the supporting side characters. I usually pick one after the characters have already come to life. Story-wise, probably the Drago. There's a Drago that looks kind of like a dragon, and I felt strongly about it when I was writing the scenario. I could just feel the pangs of emotion." I wonder if his opinions changed at all by the time Mother 3 actually saw release.
In a Dengeki N64 interview with Itoi from February 1997, he revealed the plot of the game had been completed. He states, quote, "The plot is done, however we've changed our approach this time, and I'm going to try and include all our ideas. Last time we had to meticulously go through and say, we can't do this, or that, or this. But in this new one, we can do this, or that. We are now in the process of picking the various ideas our staff is coming up with." He was then asked, "So you have the plot?" To which he responded, "Yes, and it's very interesting, but you might think I'm a jerk. I've changed a lot over the years, so if you've been a long-time fan, you might say, I've been expecting this betrayal for a long time. In fact, the concept of Mother 3 was decided as soon as the development of Mother 2 ended. The original concept we created back then is still alive. I really want to create a feeling of disgust." You might be thinking, what do you mean by disgust? When I'm making games, I'm always thinking about how I don't like the feeling of sadness, and perhaps I don't like the feeling of laughter either. I'm not sure how to express it, but these things have an impact which breaks things up and shakes your emotions. In Mother 2, we included the sound of a synthesized burp. I love unpleasant ideas such as these. To put it down bluntly, that's the theme of this project. It's a lot like playing against Master Belch, with many twists and turns along the way. That's what I would call originality. I want Mother 3 to be full of such things, since that's what I believe originality is. Very interesting how quickly Mr. Itoi was able to shape the story of Mother 3 compared to how long it took for the rest of the game to be made. Brendan Sector was the only non-Japanese person to have been on Mother 3's development team. This was noticed sometime after the release of the game, and he was contacted for an interview where he revealed some behind-the-scenes info on the game's development. Particularly interesting is that he confirmed that at 1UP Studios' office, at least one prototype cartridge for EarthBound 64 was present for reference. He states, 1UP Studios had a stock N64 in their meeting room. The game was stored on what appeared to be a rewritable N64 development cartridge. The program on the card appeared to be very much an alpha build. If it had been moderately ready for a release, I suspect it would have been released for the N64. He also states, "The president of 1UP Studios said that if I want to try out the N64 prototype, it's in the meeting room. I wasn't a Mother fan, but I was trying to be enthusiastic about my position there, so I tried it out. As far as I can recall, it was most of the first chapter, with a very Flintstones feel, and some cut scenes. The game crashed towards the end of the chapter. Given Mother 1 has a very Peanuts feel, it makes one wonder, how would it have been to play a Flintstones-feeling Mother game instead? Back when EarthBound 64 was first shown in late 1996, a couple of the clips of footage and screenshots show this mysterious character that resembles Ness and Ninten. For a long time, a lot of people thought this actually was Ness, but it was concluded later on it might actually be Klaus instead, as we saw this mystery kid near Lucas in a couple of images. Turns out that wasn't the case either, and instead, this boy was nobody. Literally. For context, in a Dengeki N64 interview with Itoi, he states this is, quote, "a boy who probably won't appear in the actual game. I would like to think of him as a special appearance to make the world of Mother easier to understand." So yeah, this isn't Ness, or Klaus, or anyone. It's just a familiar face. Isaac was one of the characters whose design changed the most from the N64 version of Mother 3 to the GBA version. They may as well not even be the same character. However, it is very possible that there was a redesign between these two versions that has yet to surface. Isaac's last appearance in any EarthBound 64 material was in 1997, which was the year major overhaul work on EarthBound 64's visuals began, and continued on all the way until the game's cancellation. With so many characters like Lucas and Duster being redesigned to look more grounded, it's possible Isaac was redesigned too, but we'll never know for sure until EarthBound 64's prototype gets leaked. The 64 disk drive version of Mother 3 was reportedly planned to have some connectivity to the Mario Artist series of games, of which there were 4 made for the disk drive before its discontinuation. Mr. Miyamoto, in a December 1997 interview, stated, quote, "It does have a structure that would allow importing Mario Artist drawings into Mother 3 though. But this isn't something really elaborated on. We know more specifically that it was planned that you could plaster photos of your own face onto character models in Mother 3. It's likely that this was not ever planned to be part of the game beyond simply testing out inter-game connectivity features." Around 2006, some fan-made Mother 3 images were posted online of mock-ups of the game in Legend of Zelda Wind Waker's art style. These images made the rounds on several sites and were believed by many to be a fan-game project or even official images for Mother 3 getting a console remake for the GameCube. The images were made in the 3D modeling software Maya, which is used in the making of many games, TV shows, and movies across all industries. The actual origin of the pictures are a bit of a mystery. They seem to have originally been posted on 2chan before spreading to other places. We had no luck trying to find the actual artist of the renders, and it seems it may be lost to time. While many have seen the 3D renders that floated around, less have seen the fan art another artist did of a Mother 3 and Zelda crossover. The trail seems to go cold from here though, but it isn't impossible that somebody who speaks Japanese more fluently may be able to find something we missed.
Prior to 2021, this one enemy present in a few EarthBound 64 screenshots was believed to be a boar. I mean, there's a boar enemy in the GBA version of Mother 3, so why wouldn't this have just been the N64 equivalent to that? Well, upon the discovery and translation of a Space World 99 demo report for Mother 3 by a Mother fan named Jinko, it was proven that these actually weren't boars, but instead capybaras. How awesome. It is a common headcanon that Duster is rather tall. However, N64 Duster was likely shorter than several other characters, including Kumatora. One screenshot from EarthBound 64 shows him to be a whole head shorter than Flint. While the GBA art style makes it more ambiguous as to how tall he actually is, the limitations of the art style result in some funky stuff like Hinawa being almost taller than Flint, when the N64 designs show Flint being much taller. I still think the intention was for him to be on the shorter side, which would make sense as Wes is rather short too. An additional character cut from the N64 version of Mother 3 was the New Age retro hippie, making a return from the first 2 Mother games. He was to be a mysterious person who appeared in Tazmily Village one day with no explanation. It's unconfirmed what his role was going to be, but some suspect that he served the same role as the item guy in the GBA version, and that the item guy replaced his role in that version. Mr. Kemley is another EarthBound 64 cut character we know about from before the game's cancellation. As revealed in Volume 10 of the Mother 3 Times, he was a 70-year-old villager living in Great Scale Village and found a mysterious substance on the coast nearby Great Scales Cove. In the August 1997 issue of Dengeki N64, Benimaro Ito announced a Mother 3 Performer contest. This was for a lucky entrant to be selected to be modelled as an NPC in EarthBound 64. The winner of this contest was Mr. Hiroki Mukodani, a 12-year-old boy with a face full of charm. Unfortunately, with EarthBound 64's cancellation and shift to GBA, Mr. Mukodani is nowhere to be seen in the final game. What a tragic cut from that game. Thanks once again to the Mother 3 times. We know the ages of a bunch of characters from EarthBound 64 pre-time skip, those being Lucas and Klaus are 7, Boney is 1, Isaac is 21, PK Perkle is 55, Lighter is 30, Ed is 30, Nan is 25, Butch is 15, Nana is 12, Fuel is 8, Nicole is 5, and Richie is 7. It is unknown if most or any of these ages are still canon to the GBA version of the game. One very strange change between N64 and GBA Mother 3 is the genders of a few characters swapping between versions, those being Ale going from being a boy to being a girl, and Richie and Nicole swapping both their genders with each other. I have no idea why these changes were made. Maybe it was just miscommunication during development.
In Volume 16 of the Mother 3 Times, it's shown that a mysterious crop circle had appeared in the Sunshine Forest. It was discovered by Isaac while picking mushrooms. He saw, quote, some strangely dressed people who fled the scene at inhuman speeds. The crop circle spun around and dissipated, leaving behind a searing mark in the ground. Pretty neat detail that sadly didn't make it into the GBA version of Mother 3. There's this one screenshot which comes from some sort of lost Space World 97 EarthBound 64 footage mentioned earlier, of Isaac talking to Flint. It's speculated that the house next to them is what Flint and his family's house looked like in EarthBound 64. And while I can believe it, it'd really be nice to get some confirmation one day. Looking at the battle HUD both for Flint and for Kumatora in EarthBound 64 shows they have some sort of ability called Strength. This is interesting. It's unknown if any of the other playable characters had this strength ability, but it's speculated that only these two had this move, and that both had similar moves to each other overall. What does this ability do though? We don't know, sorry. As revealed in Jinko's Space World 99 Mother 3 demo report, when you had more than one party member, accomplished in the demo by finding and recruiting Lucas and Flint, you could swap between them as the leading party member on the overworld by facing each other and pressing the Z button on the N64 controller, in which the players would high-five while swapping. Sort of like Donkey Kong Country, actually. In addition to being able to swap on the overworld, it's known you could also swap your active party member in battle in EarthBound 64. The game was seemingly going to have a different battle system to the first two Mother games. Instead of controlling all of your party at once, you and the enemy would fight one-on-one, enabling for strategizing by the enemy to pull out certain enemies strong against a particular party member, but you could optimize in battle the same way too, simply by flicking the control stick, allowing you to rotate and swap between your party.
As briefly mentioned earlier in a Nintendo Dream interview in July of 2006, in response to being told the love theme was a real tearjerker, Mystery Toy revealed that, quote, actually, the song was made specially later on. Actually, we didn't even have that song until far into the game's development. When the ending was still unfinished, we were considering just using the Pig Masks theme, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, for our main song. Personally, at the time, I was perfectly content with using the Pig Mask song as the main theme, but during an extremely important scene, we decided it was necessary to have a new song created that would have the greater impact regarding what we wanted most to portray. It was December of 2005 when I announced on Hobonichi, it's almost finished. The love theme didn't even exist, but it added a sense of emotion that practically changed some of the actual story. It's weird to think one of Mother 3's most iconic tracks didn't even exist until this late into development. Still left within the game's files is the melancholic track that the love theme went on to replace. On the topic of some of the original music in Mother 3, another point of interest is one of the tracks found within the jukebox in the Dirty Cafe, which are all but confirmed to be songs intended for other parts of the game originally, that are reused here so they don't all go to waste. This particular one of discussion being Fairies, Neckbeard's recommendation. As explained by Shogo Sakai in the liner notes of Mother 3i, he tried to get the Tazumeli theme from the N64 version of the game and rework it to fit in the GBA version. He wrote, quote, I did want to use it for financial reasons. I wanted to use what I could rather than create new songs for the GBA version. In fact, several versions of this song were ported to the device, but when I heard it in-game it felt too slow and leisurely and didn't fit. Even increasing the tempo didn't work. The impression from the spacious N64 screen is different from the impression from the size of the Game Boy Advance screen. In other words, the game screen naturally chooses the song for me. It's speculated that he was referring to Fairies, which of course was only just a jukebox track in the final game. Mother 1 and 2 have some unused content, some stuff like names for NPCs that aren't displayed anywhere in the actual game, but Mother 3 contains significantly more, and while most would agree the interesting parts of unused content are the leftovers from elements of the story that were changed, what about the stuff that doesn't contradict what's present in the final game? Stuff like a sprite of the masked man being operated on, or Flint herding the sheep outside his house doesn't actually go against what's presented in the final game, so it can still be canon, right? If it brings you joy to think so, then why not? In the files of Mother 3 is this sprite showing the text, Happy End. The purpose of this sprite is completely unknown. While it may lead you to believe multiple endings were planned, this is confirmed to not be true, since in an interview with Satoru Iwata, he revealed that Mother 3 was never intended to have such a feature. One of the most mysterious unused sets of character sprites found within Mother 3's files is this unused post-time skip Lucas animation. It depicts Lucas being picked up by his head, fighting against it, and getting thrown to the ground. It's entirely unknown what this would have been used for, or what he's supposed to be picked up by, and no other unused sprites in the files seem to line up with these frames.
So many people have assumed for a long time that Lucas's attack instrument is a keytar, and some less informed fans of Mother 3 still think this is the case. However, according to the Mother 3i liner notes written by Shogo Sakai, Lucas uses a natural, clean guitar. Makes sense for someone like him, huh? In Mother 3, the size of Lucas's head for his post-time skip climbing sprites revert to a similar size to his pre-time skip sprites, for whatever reason. This discovery does indicate that it's likely that Lucas's pre-time skip sprites were the ones designed first before the post-time skip ones, and that the post-time skip ones were created by editing the younger sprites. Getting any insight on the order in which stuff for Mother 3 was created is interesting in my book. From the early 2020s Nintendo GigaLeaks, one of the only Mother series things to come from it was an internal content review schedule showing that Mother 3 for GBA was scheduled for a release date in October 2005. This implies a lot of things, but just know the game of course didn't release this early and had to be pushed back until April 2006 to be finished. It seems that there exists multiple papier-mâché models of the protagonists of Mother 1 and 2. This can be more easily seen with these two Nintens, but is more subtle to notice with other characters like Jeff and Pooh. We know a set of these models are owned by Itoi and Hobonichi still. Perhaps the other set was made for Nintendo themselves to hold on to?
SMAP was a Japanese boy band that was together from the late 1980s up through 2016. To cut to the chase, they were massive and beloved by much of the entire country. Their name, SMAP, is an acronym for Sports Music Assemble People. The group debuted properly in 1991 and have since then been often referred to as a national treasure and a fortune and property of the country in Japan. They achieved an unprecedented level of success in numerous genres in the entertainment industry, including music, television, film, radio, theater, as a group and as individuals, and they're credited for changing the Japanese entertainment and music industry in terms of prolonging longevity of boy bands and broadening careers by creating new opportunities for bands that followed. Their success only grew as they became more and more popular outside their original teen girl demographic and became huge across several others. To give you an idea of their popularity, SMAP released 55 singles, all of which reached the top 10 in the charts, 22 consecutive number 1 singles, and 33 number 1 singles in total. The band has had 24 top 10 albums and 14 number 1 albums, and their song, The One and Only Flower in the World from 2003, is the best-selling single in the 21st century and the third best-selling single in Japanese history. So, what does any of this have to do with EarthBound? Well, 2 things. 1. Kimura Takuya, a member of the band, was featured prominently in Mother 2's Japanese commercials as the older brother and in magazine ads. And 2, like the Beatles, they're featured as a naming scheme within the game, where each character will be named after one of the band members, and the corresponding favorite thing will be SMAP. As the legends tell, in November of 2011 there was a listing on Yahoo Japan Auctions for a Mother 3 mousepad, given away as a developer promotional item given away at a Mother 3 party. What this party is isn't known definitively, but likely was a completion party held after the game's development reached its end. The mousepad is said to be red with the Mother 3 logo in the corner and a Nintendo and Game Boy Advance logo on there too. No photos of this mousepad have surfaced, or preserved any photos from that Yahoo Auctions listing, and is pretty much the rarest piece of Mother merchandise in existence. For some reason, EarthBound is rated M, and EarthBound Beginnings is rated PG in Australia. For EarthBound, it's apparently because of the crude humor and sexual references. It really makes me wonder what Mother 3 would have been rated if it got a release over there. Something that's been recently researched is when the Mother 3 team decided to switch from making the game for the 64 disk drive to the base N64, and when this info became public knowledge. Officially, the switch from disk to cart was at Space World 99 in August 1999, when the demo for the game was being shown played on a base N64. However, the first mentioning of this switch from any official source comes not only from Nintendo of America instead of Nintendo of Japan, but it was all the way back in August 1998, as someone in a Google Groups post shared an email they received from a Nintendo of America employee who confirmed EarthBound 64 was to come out on a cartridge. Basically, this employee leaked the info a year early, making this one of the earliest leaks related to Mother 3.
Some of the odder characters in Mother 3 are the hot spring people. Throughout the game, there's several hot springs they can be rested in to restore the party's health. At these hot springs, there's a chance an old man can appear who simply says, "Yes?" But much more rarely, a young woman can appear who says, "Mixed-gender bathing?" The latter is significantly less likely to appear, with many going several playthroughs without ever seeing her. They'll also disappear by simply exiting the room and returning, leading to some fan theories that suggest they're ghosts. On Thane Island, during the mushroom sequence, their appearances are also affected, with the old man becoming Facade and the young woman becoming Ionia, though their dialogue stays the same. The exact odds of seeing them isn't exactly known, but it's supposedly the old man has a 1 in 32 chance of appearing, while the young woman could be anywhere from 1 in 64 to 1 in 128. We absolutely have the technology to check for sure, but isn't the mystery fun too? In 2018, longtime Mother community member Chaz released a YouTube video titled Mystery of the Mole Playing Rough, explaining why the enemy appears at the beginning of the Dusty Dunes Desert, Summers, and Deep Darkness for seemingly no reason. The video is lauded for uncovering and explaining EarthBound's Game Over glitch, where the game bugs out a bit and lets the player continue playing while dead sometimes. The whole video is worth a watch, but to briefly explain, the Game Over glitch is triggered by losing a scripted battle while something called the OSS flag is set, which is normally used to keep the player safe during cutscenes or scripted sequences. Because random encounters are scripted to set the flag at the beginning of battle and disable it at the end, they placed guaranteed mole playing rough spawns in a few key choke points to ensure the flag would be disabled. He also speculates that the flag is intentionally in the wrong state on your first visit to the desert to give you an opportunity to talk to the NPCs and explore without worrying about getting heat stroke until you're ready to move further into the desert. Among the most rare of EarthBound merchandise is the Tsukashan Mother 2 jacket. The jacket was first worn by Shingo Katori, a member of the previously discussed SMAP, on a TV show called Hey 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 Music Champ to help promote Mother 2. Another one was worn by SMAP member Takuya Kimura, who you may know as the face of Takayuki Yagami from Yakuza. The jacket was auctioned off online in 2003 for about $300. It was believed to be a one-of-a-kind for a long time until it was found that several of them were made as gifts for the Japanese dev team for Mother 2's completion. This included Satoru Iwata, who went on record calling the jacket, quote, one of his most prized possessions. In February of 2021, Hobonichi sold a limited run of them as part of the Hobonichi Mother project. For 88,000 yen, about $850 at the time, with Itoi modeling one himself. While it fixed some bugs, Mother 1+2 introduced its own bugs into the game. Perhaps the most famous of them is the improper programming of the exit mouse. In this version only, if the player brings an exit mouse to the Cave of the Past and uses it in Gygas' lair, it will actually bring them back to the present. This glitch is only here too. The player is unable to use the exit mouse anywhere else in the past. Once the player leaves, they'll see they've returned to a bugged version of the present. All of the places that are shown during the prayer sequence are already set up to play the prayer music and have the various sprites in place. A popular weird EarthBound fan video is on YouTube, and it's called JeffBound. It was uploaded in October 2022 by The Muckamuck, and showcases seemingly a hack for EarthBound that makes everything Jeff. What does one do in JeffBound? Well, they simply spend most of their life living in a Jeffy paradise. He lives a simple life, the only person smart enough to survive the worldwide apocalypse, when everybody else moves to Nowhere Islands. He claims Eagleland for himself. Long live JeffBound.
While not a ton has been discovered about the EarthBound beta besides what's been known for decades, one thing tends to be sort of desired to be forgotten. That is the tender's original design, which is this. And now you know why we don't talk about it. While not likely intended to be taken the way literally everyone takes it, it's a troublesome visual that makes many uncomfortable nonetheless. While not known if the perceived obvious reasons it was changed during development were in fact the reasons it was changed, we all rejoice having dodged this bullet and the many uncomfortable conversations we would have had with people who we were introducing the game to. The Mani Mani statue was a device Gygus used to spread his evil influence throughout Eagle Land. The device was in the ground and discovered when dug up by Liar Exaggerate. The understanding by many is Gygus placed it in the distant past, leading it to be underground in the present, when Liar finds it, as the way Gygus, like BuzzBuzz says, is attacking from the past. Though many seem familiar with Liar finding it and being the reason it spreads throughout EarthBound's world, less seem to understand the meticulous planning on Gygus' part to use it. By planting it somewhere, it eventually would become essentially a fossil. It would have been practically impossible for Ness to find and destroy, so indirectly, Liar finding it actually ended up assisting Ness in his adventure. So yeah, that really blew up in Gygus' face, huh? Throughout this video, you've probably heard something called Mother Encyclopedia referred to. Well, now we're finally getting to what that is. So first things first, we've been lying to you. It's actually called Encyclopedia Mother. I just like the way Mother Encyclopedia sounds better. With that out of the way, what is Encyclopedia Mother? Well, it's a Japanese exclusive supplementary guide for EarthBound beginnings, roughly serving a similar purpose to the EarthBound Player's Guide. It has lots of extra information about the game's world, characters, and tons of art. This includes biographies of the 4 main party members, including their favourite things. 2 versions of the book were released. The first one was released with the Famicom game, and the second one to coincide with Mother 1+2's release, sometimes called the Wonder Life Special. These both have a lot of information in them, so we can't get through all of it here, but we'll touch on a couple more things. The book is one of the very few official Mother products that refers to the main character as Ninten. Another notable element is each town gets essentially a brochure of information, which may have served as inspiration for the EarthBound Player's Guide doing something similar, having newspapers for each town. And for now, finally, while the book is primarily in Japanese, some pages are in full English, probably to help capture the game's American setting, as well as English lyrics to some of the game's songs throughout. While many are aware of the Happy Happyism's cult resemblance to the Ku Klux Klan, lesser known is its likely inspirations from other real-life cults. The Aim Shinrikyo was a cult in Japan that was prominent in the 1980s and 90s, and had an impact on a lot of contemporary Japanese media. The group was founded and headed by Shoko Ashara, and was known for its aggressive and violent acts, such as murder of a cult member who tried to leave in 1989. The cult's central belief was that the United States would start World War III in 1997, growing more violent over time and coordinating public attacks. Another possible influence is Happy Science, also started in the 1980s. Happy Science combines beliefs from many ancient cultures, and its leaders claim to be able to communicate with the guardian spirits of many political elites. The group has also become a political party that's even recognized in the United States. The actual god they worship is a bit of a rabbit hole, but to be concise, the group believes its current leader, Ryuho Okawa, is the current incarnation of it. So, to keep things simple, it's him. Interestingly enough, the group actually had a bitter rivalry in the 1990s with the Aim Shinrikyo, which culminated in a failed assassination attempt on Okawa using the nerve agent VX injected into his car's air conditioning. It seems elements from both organizations served as partial inspirations for the Happy Happyists. Since Magicant is a subconscious shared by Queen Mary in Mother 1 with Ninten and Co., and Magicant in EarthBound is Ness's inner mind, some have interpreted Magicant conceptually as the global subconscious, a concept coined by psychoanalyst Carl Jung. It refers to the collective mind of shared concepts. According to Jung, the human collective unconscious is populated by instincts as well as by archetypes being primal symbols of sorts. Jung argued, very politely, that the collective subconscious explains common motifs in humans' cultures around the world, particularly in relation to mythology, and that those primal symbols are coloured by people's experiences. This concept is central to the practice of analytical psychology, also coined by Jung. This might explain the Magicant's abstract imagery, and things like Ness's understanding of people literally colouring his world, as well as the biblical imagery throughout it, and that everyone has their own Magicant.
The Franklin badge is one of the most iconic elements from the Mother series, but it's also sort of weird. According to Encyclopedia Mother, it was worn by Benjamin Franklin during his kite experiments with electricity. Fair enough, has a sort of American thing to it. Makes sense, and it reflects electricity, so neat. But there's more. First, in Mother 1 at least, there's several of them. 3 badges, and assuming these aren't either of the ones from Mother 2 and 3, that makes 5 total. It's also implied that if the badge gets dirty, it just stops being reflective somehow. But my favorite part of the lore is this. You know how the Franklin badge has a lightning bolt on it and a Mother logo for some reason? Well, according to an official Mother 1 manual, it looks like this. At least the ones from Mother 1 do. Meaning Benjamin Franklin bare minimum looked like this during his most famous experiment in the Mother canon. The Claymen from Mother 3 are some pretty interesting characters, but Mr. Itoy admits he's not the most satisfied with what he was able to achieve with them in the final game. In reference to the GBA designs of the Claymen present in the final, he said, "I felt their design this time was okay, but to tell you the truth, I still feel like the very best Clayman design would have turned out differently." He continued by saying, "It was important material for me, almost to the point where I could let someone make a movie about the Claymen. You can make that claim that Claymen are people too. So, I wonder if we'll ever see that Claymen movie someday. Probably not." For a couple years, Fangamer held conventions known as Camp Fangamer, where there'd be art, games, and live streams. At Camp Fangamer 2016, a mysterious mannequin of Lucas was made that moved around the convention. People took pictures with it and just generally messed around with it. And similarly, at MagFest 2020, a Nintendo mannequin also appeared. It was brought by the team behind the documentary Mother to Earth. This one, though, actually got stolen during the convention and was missing for about 5 hours before showing up at the convention's security office. He was returned safe and sound, though some say he's still 4th D slipping around the convention center to this day. Prepare for one heck of a theory. Seeing as the Nintendo Anna and Lloyd paper mache models do not fit in very stylistically with the other models from Mother 1, coupled with the crudeness of Pippi's model, it is possible that Nintendo, Anna, and Lloyd at some point had earlier, stylistically different models at some point that match with how Pippi's looks, and that they just didn't bother making a new Pippi one that went along better with the new art style. So as you're probably aware, Mother 3 never received paper mache models in any capacity despite Mother 1 and 2 getting them. It's never been confirmed as to why, but a set of models, these ones actually made from clay, commonly are mistaken to be official, when in reality these were created by a Mexican webcomic artist named Macatl. This set of the main characters of Mother 3 were made in 2006, and are very high quality, to the point where even artists like Omocat in the official Pollyanna 2 book based her drawings of Kumatora and Duster on these models. Sadly, he wasn't credited for this, but hey, go check out this guy's work, he's a cool dude. Also worth mentioning are a few models that were made by Nobuhiro Imagawa, made years after the game's release, which he posted on Twitter, so that's neat.
In China, the Mother games are called Earth Adventure. This is interesting because these games were and still aren't officially translated into any dialect of Chinese, but Mother's international appeal is too strong for barriers like that, as fan guides were written regardless. Lindsay Nelson is a longtime Starman.net user who goes by the name Chewy. She's also become known for her work abroad in Japan at Hobonichi. That's right, for quite some time she actually worked for Itoy, doing translation work for his company, and he even mentioned her in an interview once. In addition to her work there, she's also an on and off employee for Fangamer. She's been a sort of liaison between Japan and America for the Mother series throughout her time online. Before the more recent fan translations of the novels, it was Chewy who was translating the Mother 2 one, even hosting a website dedicated to it. This connection led to a heartwarming story of empathy and community. A man named James Hensiuk was diagnosed with cancer, and his close friend Ben Bizzle reached out to people at Starman.net to ask if anyone had any connections to Itoy seeking to get his copy of EarthBound, which was originally gifted to him by James, signed. His goal was to auction it off in order to help pay for James's medical bills. To many surprise, Starman.net did have a connection through Chewy. She wrote up the letter that was sent to Itoy along with the game. A few days later, Itoy responded with an email containing images of the cartridge, showing he made it out to James, misunderstanding it as a gift to James, not to be sold on his behalf. He corrected it by simply adding a curve to the top of the T and adding an R, making it for James. It was auctioned off in the next month, with all bids being collected for charity. The winner was Esther Zinn, who donated a total of $5,256.28. The hieroglyph artifact the player gets at the Summers Museum has some history and a prophecy written on it. It is as follows. To fight against the invaders, we built this pyramid fortress. However, our efforts were futile and we lost. Nonetheless, our pyramid was protected by the gods of Scaraba. The invaders will be reborn every millennium and will attack again. Even now, the invaders hide beyond space and time and build their evil stronghold. A place out of time is beyond the dark and is even farther beyond the lost underworld. The deep darkness is shrouded, it is without light. Only one with the hawk eye can pierce the dark. The Sphinx now watches over everything, waiting for the coming of a truly brave hero. Then follows the pattern to open the pyramid in Scaraba. There are multiple things to note on this, first being that some things were changed in the localization. Deep darkness was called the Evil Lands, and the Lost Underworld was called the Abyss, or more literally, the bottom of the earth. Exempt from the translation, the original text actually says, "It is said every 1,000 years the invader from the heavens will be reborn and attack again." The heavens mention was removed, likely to avoid any religious references. The prophecy has given headway to much fan speculation and many fan theories. What many find so interesting is that the invader attacks from space, connecting to how Ninten confronted Gygas in Mother 1, possibly suggesting these two stories are 1,000 years apart, or that the invasion of Gygas' forces in Mother 1 is not the first time his race has attempted to eradicate humanity. The whole prophecy has been studied by the fanbase for its connections to Mother 1. Some Japanese fans have even speculated Porky is actually the invader, seeing as he has the power to travel through time. There's a lot of room for speculation here. One of the most intriguing elements, though, is it has given way to the semi-popular fan theory that Mother 1 actually takes place at the end of the Mother series timeline. It's way too complex to explain in depth, but to summarize, Mother 1 is the newly created world after Mother 3, and Mother 3 takes place between the aliens every millennium attacks. This, of course, presents a lot of questions about Gygas' ability to persist through all that time, and his transformation from formless horror into a regular grey alien, and his entire backstory in Mother 1 as a whole, which doesn't exactly state anything about being the reborn consciousness of a soul of an ancient formless horror. It's still fun to think about, especially given Itoi has made it clear on numerous occasions he left elements like Mother's timeline vague enough to encourage fans to ask these kinds of questions. The Blue Disc saga is perhaps the first notable development in the EarthBound 64 community in the time following the cancellation of the game. To summarize, in 2004, a Starman.net user got into contact with a person who supposedly was in possession of a prototype 64DD development disc labeled M3KMOX, which was believed to be related in some capacity to Mother 3 Forest of the Chimera. It took about 6 years total before it was discovered none of the discs had any Mother 3 data on them. This is another one of the alleged reasons Mother 3 won't be localized, according to some members of the community. In Mother 3, there's a scene where Ionia, one of the Magypsies, a line of magical non-binary non-humans, awakens Lucas's ability to use PSI while in a hot spring in the 4th chapter of the game. This scene is left intentionally vague as the screen goes black and doesn't show anything until Lucas's head emerges from the water. This has led to many saying that what occurs during the scene is some form of sexual assault. However, it is theorized by some that the intentional vagueness of this scene is done for the purpose of making the player second-guess themselves, and recognize that they're only assuming child abuse is happening because of some personal biases. I personally was shocked to hear this theory was even a thing, as when I had first played Mother 3, I had taken the scene more like Pooh's mood training. We previously brought up a quote from Itoi on how he wanted fans to take Mother 3 where he says, quote, "I wanted to make Mother 3 like a mirror, one that reflects the heart of the player off of the screen." Perhaps this scene is something of a litmus test for what kind of person the player is.
Video Game Donkey's primarily known for his one-off videos of messing around in video games, but prior to this format, he did some proper classic Let's Play videos. This included a now-deleted 10-episode blind Let's Play of EarthBound, in which he gets stuck in Tucson for about half the series, keeps getting mushroomized and dying, eventually rage-quitting and never finishing the playthrough. The series is notoriously frustrating to watch, and is of now available to watch only through re-uploads. Also, he never learns to save at phones, so he keeps dying and respawning in Ness's house. Painful, just painful. But hey, at least he came around to appreciating it later, right? A somewhat recent discussion in the fandom has been centered around this image. This illustration of the Nowhere Islands is one of the few existing pieces of official Mother 3 artwork. This illustration is notably of the Nowhere Islands pre-time skip, as seen by how the village is laid out, yet Club Titty seems to be there, a location only seen after the time skip. Now, it's entirely and evidently possible it existed prior to that, but seeing as the club was primarily a reprieve for the factory and its mine workers, it does bring into question what the purpose of it may have been prior to this, as it's a place that sells things, which didn't exist prior. Could have been a bartering type situation like Thomas's Bazaar was pre-time skip, but the club, again, is implied to be a creation of the Pigmask army. This branches into a discussion of just how long the army was present on the islands, and how long it took Porky's plans to come to fruition, and just how long it was planned for. Prepare for the info dump of a lifetime. The story found within the N64 version of Mother 3 evolved and changed a lot during its development cycle, going from a concept that is very little like any of the other Mother games, to something that is very, very similar to the version of the story found in the GBA version of Mother 3, with some distinct discrepancies. This very early version of the game's plot was to be about a detective going around their hometown to solve mysteries while trying to look after their son as a single father. As for the distinct changes from the GBA and N64 versions as the story evolved, allow me to go over a selection. There was to be a two-headed kraken that would attack Fuel at some point in the story, as well as off-screen likely killing Fuel's mother and Nana's father. But I suspect he was the Chapter 3 boss you'd face as Wes, Kumatora, and Salsa. Flint was to have PSI abilities, however it wasn't actually called PSI in the game. The game simply called it Magic. It's theorized that this was for plot-related reasons, of the Tasmally villagers literally not knowing what PSI is and thinking it's just called Magic. This ties into Volume 12 of the Mother 3 Times, where Ionia seemingly has the pseudonym of Professor Orange Kid, a homage to the character from EarthBound. Some also speculate that every playable character was to actually have Magic/PSI abilities, including Duster, Wes, and Salsa. I'm a bit more hesitant on this one, but hey, if all those monkeys in EarthBound can practice PSI, then anything's possible. Speaking of the Mother 3 Times, in Volume 14 there's this uncanny image of villagers wearing pig noses. Pretty foreshadowing. Something else interesting is that for a long while, it was believed that Thane wasn't in the game, but that may not be true. According to Mystery Toy, in his Nintendo Dream interview from July 2006, Thane was indeed partially inspired by the TV show Lost, which did not debut until after EarthBound 64's cancellation. However, Thane Island was also inspired by Twin Peaks, which aired long before EarthBound 64's development. So maybe Thane Island and the Mushroom Trip was in EarthBound 64, and instead of walking along the ocean floor and washing up on the island, maybe you were meant to sail there originally. It's also theorized that the footage from both 1997 and 1999 of Lucas riding upon a Drago back and racing against a Pigmask train is from Chapter 7, and could be from Lucas's journey to the Chimera Lab at the beginning of the chapter. This theory hypothesizes that Drago riding was to be introduced during the prologue to the game, similar to how ramming is introduced in the GBA version's prologue, and Lucas would team up with the now grown-up baby Drago after the time skip here. Seeing as the Dragos in the GBA version, despite being heavily relevant early on in the story, don't even appear after the time skip, it would have been nice to see Lucas's connection with them remain strong even after all that time. And this, I'm obligated to bring up. There is actually no direct evidence to suggest Alec was in EarthBound 64. Look at all the screenshots we have, he doesn't seem to be in any of them. However, in 2022, an anonymous developer for the N64 version of the game confirmed to Mother Forever that Alec existed at this point in development. A lot changed regarding Mother 3's story, but a lot stayed the same too. I will say that with the much darker story and tone featured within the N64 version of Mother 3 compared to the first two games, I think the visual style that they were going for actually kind of fits more than the bright graphics present in the GBA version. This would be fitting for a game that potentially had closer ties to the Notebook trilogy, a series of novels where Mystery Toy got the inspiration for Lucas and Klaus's names, and is known for some very, very heavy material. The GBA version still turned out amazing though.
You know, the last 24 screenshots of EarthBound 64 to have been released are in really poor quality. Like, they're in the same resolution that the N64 typically outputs, but they're destroyed by JPEGing. That sucks. You have to wonder if the non-compressed versions of the images are still out there somewhere on Mr. Toy's computer or something, but who knows. Advertised in Volume 3 of the Mother 3 Times from October 1997 is that Mother 3 would not only be at Space World 97 the following month, but also that the game would have a fully playable demo. This excerpt reads, Nintendo's upcoming games will be coming together and playable under one hall come Nintendo Space World 1997 on November 21st through 23rd. The show will be running until Sunday, and surprisingly it turns out Mother 3 will be exhibited and playable at the venue. According to those involved with the game's development, the beginning of the story will be revealed. Additionally, you'll also be able to witness the main engine and control some of the characters. How much they are willing to show is currently being debated among the staff. So much is still under consideration. According to one of the staff members on Mother 3's graphics team, we still have a long way to go before Mother 3 is ready for the November show, as there are still 1 or 2 technical challenges to overcome. Hopefully we can exceed expectations. Its expected development will be proceeding urgently until the event. However, come to the Space World 1997 show in November, Mother 3 was only shown on video with no demo in sight. A Mother 3 demo wouldn't come to fruition until Space World 1999, 2 years later. In the May 12th through 19th, 2006 edition of Sakurai's Famitsu column, Think About the Video Games, Masahiro Sakurai discusses Mother 3. Of interest is that he brings up the N64 version of the game, and that he's actually read that version's oh-so-coveted script. Specifically, he brings up that Klaus's final words were unforgettable. This information, as hinted earlier, indicates that not only did the final battle with the Masked Man in the N64 version have dialogue like the GBA version has, but it also suggests that the script for this battle likely didn't change much either. And I think Klaus's "I'm sure we'll meet again" in the final game is still very unforgettable. Back in 1999, when news of EarthBound 64's demo reached fans in America, a lot of people were less than satisfied because of Flint. As in, many were upset because Ness wasn't seemingly the protagonist of this game, and instead this random cowboy seemed to be. Yes, I'm not making this up. No, I'm not sure why they were so upset over this. You'd think these people had never tried any other RPG in their life to not be familiar with the concept of protagonists changing between entries of a series. You'd also think that these people didn't even play Mother 1 to be assuming Ness was in that game as well, and not just Mother 2. Very strange era for the fandom. Amongst the 24 screenshots released during EarthBound 64's cancellation, there were these 2 images of a destroyed city. In the foreground of one of them, a couple of signs can be seen. One of them saying Burger and the other saying Onett. Obviously this is very interesting, as Onett is nowhere to be seen in the final released Mother 3. So what's up with this? Was Onett meant to be in EarthBound 64, shown all destroyed? The answer to that is a resounding no. Looking to the left side of the background of this screenshot reveals that the Monotoli building from Foresight is there too if you really look carefully. This of course doesn't make geographical sense with where Onett and Foresight are in EarthBound, so there's something weird going on. That weirdness is largely agreed to be that this is either the post-timeskip version of Tazmily Village, or even Newport City. There's even an additional screenshot of what appears to be Flint speeding in a pork bean through crossroads, right in front of houses that perfectly resemble Porky and Ness's. So, okay, why is the world destroyed here? Simple, these 2 screenshots are of the final cutscene of the game from after the final needle is being pulled. You can even see the same tornadoes from the final game in the background of the Onett sign and Monotoli screenshot, and the other image shows crumbling ground in the foreground, similar again to what's shown in the GBA version. These screenshots also really indicate something else that's interesting, that the destruction of the last cutscene of the game was to be a lot more devastating. Perhaps this was one way how Mother 3's ending was intended to be darker. Even in the GBA version, there's an unused cutscene showing dead dogfish and Salsa and Samba trying to run away. Compared to the final game, it's mostly just earthquakes happening with some meteors, not really showing that much of the extent of the damage besides a few scenes of Tazmily's ground tearing apart and Oso Castle collapsing.
As can be observed in the Space World 97 Mother 3 group image, an unconfirmed pig mask of some sort can be seen in the upper left of the image. Some speculate this could be the N64 equivalent to the Navy Squeal, seeing as its color scheme is reminiscent of that of a life preserver, but it could be a pig mask lieutenant. In a CD-ROM released in 1998 called Nintendo Daijiten Volume 1, containing various info on new games and interviews with Nintendo staff, there's a section dedicated to Mother 3 that features some excerpts from an interview with Shigesato Itoi. What is said here is, quote, "There are more than 3 protagonists. You even get to meet other protagonists and experience the same scene in the shoes of another character. The protagonist's child in Chapter 1 shows up in a future chapter as an adult, an example of the story taking place over 10 years or so. 10 plus a few extra years. Gone is the light, happy atmosphere of the previous games. The story is tear-jerking, with situations such as the protagonist getting severely bullied." Mr. Itoi also states, "Let's see how many times you cry." He's only told a few members of staff on what happens in the emotional ending. He's put a lot into it. Handkerchiefs are a must for this. There's a lot to take in here. This would have you believe the game was originally meant to take place over a much longer time frame than the game we finally got to play years later. Perhaps the protagonist being bullied would give explanation for Lucas's sheepish and cowardly nature towards the beginning of the game, and the 10-year time period would have conveyed Mother's themes of growing up and the death of childhood innocence differently. It's also crazy that Itoi stated plainly, "Let's see how many times you cry." If the game truly was that much more emotional back then one can only speculate how many of those elements were cut to save our tears. If you look at Flint in EarthBound 64, or more specifically, you look at the top of his head from that one shot in the 99 trailer, you may notice his hat is asymmetrical. There's nothing more than that, just curious. One of the biggest theories surrounding EarthBound 64 in the last few years is that Boney wasn't actually a playable character despite being one in the GBA version. There is no direct evidence in any EarthBound 64 material we have that actually indicates to him having been playable. We have 100% absolute confirmation that Lucas, Flint, Kumatora, Duster, Wes, and Salsa were all playable, but not him. What circumstantial evidence suggests Boney wasn't playable, you might ask? Well, it seems EarthBound 64 supported a maximum of only 3 party members. The way the battle HUD is laid out really doesn't look like there'd be room for a 4th character. But Boney can be seen with the other characters in one scene discussed earlier involving Lucas, Flint, and Duster. So what's up with that? It's hypothesized that Boney was to be an NPC party member, similar to Facade, or King from EarthBound's opening, but he'd be with you for the majority of the game and a lot more helpful. Whether or not he would have taken part in battle is unknown, but it'd certainly make battles feel different if every turn Boney would randomly choose to attack enemies, sniff, maybe even growl, dog stuff. In this screenshot of Flint inside the Yado Inn, there's something peculiar going on. If you happen to look in the bottom right of this image, you'll notice that one of the bar stools is visible past the bottom of the screen, and that the lower portion of the image is all out of bounds. This is from the Space World 97 trailer as discussed earlier, and in said trailer, there's also a scene of Lucas in the Clayman factory where the left portion of the screen is also clipping out of bounds. While anybody who's played a few N64 games could tell you that weird clipping and out of bounds stuff is expected, it's still interesting to see official promotional material showing it off. It's postulated that should the final prototype for EarthBound 64 be found, a lot of NPC dialogue, particularly from the later chapters, would be largely incomplete. This is backed up by the fact that during the cancellation interview, the sentiment that, quote, all we had left was data input, all we had to do was create whatever remained and we'd be good to go, is repeated. The way the dialogue from other games is always written is very interesting. Usually NPC dialogue is filled in as the game is polished, which was still something underway and never fully completed for the N64 version of the game. To add to this, there's one interesting piece of dialogue that suggests the script for the game had yet to be fully polished. The screenshot of Jonal asking Flint if he wanted to hear the good news or bad news first chooses to write the English word news in katakana, reading as nyuzu. This is common in modern Japanese due to post-war Japan being bombarded with American culture that introduced thousands of loanwords. However, in the final version of the scene, he uses the word shirase, which still means news, but being a word of Japanese origin, it may present a different image of what kind of world Mother 3 takes place in, with the Nowhere Island's residents living in a more pure world free from outside influence. As far as I've been able to check, every piece of in-game dialogue across the entire Mother franchise is written exclusively in kana, but Mother 3 opts to go even further by never using the katakana script, which is mainly used for writing foreign loanwords and automatopoeia in normal use. Itoi also seems to enjoy the feel and flow of hiragana, so perhaps the decision to remove loanwords where possible and only use hiragana in the final script was driven by that as well.
One of those fabled 24 cancellation screenshots of EarthBound 64 is of Flint shopping in Thomas's Bazaar, known in the N64 version as Thomas's General Store. The NPC on the right we know is Lisa, but the one on the left is a mystery. There really aren't any old ladies in Tazmily pre-time skip in the GBA version, so this is definitely another cut NPC. But who is it? Seeing as this screenshot takes place in Thomas's store, it's speculated that this is meant to be Thomas's mother and the wife of Mike. It'd make sense, wouldn't it? Revealed back in early 1997 by an issue of Weekly Famitsu, Facade was to be playable in the N64 version of Mother 3, alongside Lucas, Duster, and Salsa. This, of course, presents what would potentially be a slightly different dynamic for Salsa and Facade. After the GBA version's release, Mystery Toy, on the subject of playable Facade, said, "During battles, there are times when Facade appears to be a reliable ally. That evokes very complex emotions. Basically, the person who hurts you the most is the one who comes to your aid to save you from outside enemies. I wonder how accentuated this would have been had Facade been fully playable." Another reveal from late 1996 is this screenshot of Pigmasks marching through the desert with a strange ice cream looking machine, reportedly having been designed by Dr. Andernuts. It is theorized that the design of this machine is actually that of a drill, being for drilling underground to search for needles. Was the Dragon Needles plot already conceived this early in development? It seems more likely than one might think. In a deleted map in the GBA version of Mother 3, if you manage to load it into the game, the background music that plays is Blessing, Skinhead's recommendation. Being one of the previously mentioned jukebox tracks, it's unknown as to what the exact original purpose of this song was, but it is surmised that this is a deleted map for Great Scale Village, with the original background music still intact. Now what the heck is a Great Scale Village, you ask? Well, in the N64 version, Tazmily Village wasn't actually meant to be the only village on the Noah Islands pre-time skip. Great Scale was meant to be a beach town far east of Tazmily. In the final game, Great Scale does actually appear as just the Great Scale Beach, west of Tazmily. In case you don't recognize the name, it's probably because for some unknown reason, the Mother 3 fan translation renamed this location from Great Scale Beach to Cerulean Beach. Anyway, this music in particular could be the theme to the village because it very much has a coastal vibe to it, and this deleted map could be from a point in development when the GBA version was meant to also have a more fully realised Great Scale Village. There are two instances in Mother 3 where Alec breaks the fourth wall. First happens during the prologue where he lets the player know they can save by talking to frogs, and second is during the Thane Island segment if you happen to venture there without Duster in your party. There's very unsettling dialogue of Alec asking if you've seen Hinawa, and if you say no, he looks directly at you and says he knows you've seen her. Pretty scary. You probably remember at the beginning of Chapter 2 of Mother 3 where Duster gets ambushed by a bunch of zombies while in the Sunset Cemetery. However, the N64 version of this scene is a little different. The Spaceworld 99 trailer shows a very creepy robotic zombie hybrid emerging from a grave. This indicates that these are actually chimeras made from zombies that the pig masks were operating on to mechanize, sorta like what they do to a certain masked man later in the game.
A certain bit of unused text in Mother 3's files has Locria saying Newpork Island instead of Newpork City. Not really too much else to say here, but this early name could have all sorts of implications. Some things seem to suggest that originally Flint was meant to accompany Lucas through Chapter 6 instead of Boney. The first bit of evidence that suggests this are that Boney's sprites for the Sunflower Fields are labeled under 46, which just so happens to be the same number for Flint's speaker entry. What's written on the cutting room floor puts it better than I could word it, so to quote what's said on there about this oddity, the sprite group seems to have been sloppily copy and pasted from Boney's normal sprite group, leaving duplicates of Boney's normal sprites left unused in the group, indicating that Boney in the Sunflower Fields was a late change in development. These suggest that this sprite group originally contained one for Flint, and seeing as Lucas's Sunflower Field sprites are located right after this one, they were likely for Flint being in the Sunflower Field. But wait, there's more. There's also these unused animations of Flint looking up walking, looking up talking, and looking up and then floating or falling away. It looks like these could very well be Flint interacting with Hinawa's ghost at the edge of the fields. Perhaps he was to say some sort of dialogue to Hinawa before jumping off. Then Lucas was to jump off too? Very interesting. Worth mentioning as well is that in the N64 version, look again at that scene with the gang grabbing onto the airship. Lucas is holding on to Flint, and Boney is holding on to Duster. Wouldn't it make sense if Flint and Lucas fell into the same spot because of this? Go ahead.
And just sit here.
Hey, doggy, here, let me.
As we've previously been discussing, Flint was to have a bigger role in Mother 3 originally, specifically having been playable in Chapters 4 and 5. But what does that mean for Kumatora, who is playable in the final game's version of Chapter 5? What was her role to be here originally? We don't know, but we do have a theory. It is speculated that during the events of Chapter 5, she was to go off and train with the Magypsies in order to bolster her PSI abilities to help ensure victory over the Pigmask army and return in Chapter 7 for the Needle Hunt. This lines up with the knowledge that Kumatora was to have a stronger connection to the Magypsies in the game, originally particularly being Ionia's apprentice. This would have been intriguing to see, I think.
That was great.
Thanks.
For a very long time, it was speculated that part of the reason why some feel Mother 3 is incomplete is due to the developers internally running out of storage space in the 32 megabyte ROM that Mother 3 occupies. However, this does not seem to be the case at all. According to Jeffman, one of the main hackers for the Mother 3 fan translation, there is, quote, tons of uncompressed stuff in Mother 3's ROM, and that it almost feels like they selectively compressed things until it fit into 32 megabytes and then stopped. Oh, those devs thought they were slick. Yeah, point is, if they really intended for more content to be in the game, they could have compressed more things, leaving the major reason for a lack of more content being time constraints rather than lack of storage. An unused line of text from a pig mask in Mother 3 has mystified many fans for a number of years. There was a pig mask supposedly in the Chimera lab with the unused line, I guess you could say he's Gygassy. So, what does this line mean? Was Gygas meant to be in Mother 3? And why would this random pig mask know about him? What's the answer? Well, according to Tomato, who did a majority of the translating for the Mother 3 fan translation, he didn't know about Gygas exactly. The line doesn't work well in translation. He was trying to put the feeling into a word that didn't exist, and it just happened to come out as Gigu. Japanese uses sound words to express feelings all the time, so this isn't anything unusual. In fact, Itoi even said that he came up with Gygu's name from the fact that it simply sounded unpleasant and disturbing. So the answer? No and no. In an old YouTube video from 2008, someone claimed that a pattern in the grass near Youngtown in EarthBound Zero was a, quote, subliminal message that spells out 666. The video was passed around for a while and remains pretty obscure to this day. The video also hilariously ends in a screamer to give you an idea of the time frame it's from. Though the video itself didn't catch on much, the reported mark of the beast on the ground has been remembered and is the subject of many spooky posts online.
The Geek voice auditions are a selection of early YouTube videos where some Mother fans posted their interpretations of what Geek might sound like, oftentimes done with a voice filter of some sort. These videos were sometimes passed around Starman.net, but the trend was basically dead by only 2009. Mother 3 has an unused item in it called the Suspicious Tea. This item deals a decent amount of damage in battle. A fan theory suggests this tea is somehow poisoned in some way, and that it was meant for Lucas to drink at the Dirty Cafe just off the road to Thunder Tower. This theory, as you can see plainly, is unfounded and doesn't go further than this speculation. If you had to guess when the first time Mother 3 was officially mentioned, when would you say? 1996? 1994? If you guessed either of those years, you'd be incorrect. It was instead first mentioned all the way back in 1992, 2 years before Mother 2 even released. This mention comes from a June 19, 1992 interview with Weekly Famitsu, where upon being asked, "So what's this about a CD-ROM?" Itoi responds by saying, "Ah, yeah, we're gonna do one. It's decided. We've been thinking about it alongside this game. We've also decided what kind of game we're going to make. Whether it's gonna be Mother 3, I'm not sure, but it's gonna be awesome. I thought of it in the middle of the night. It was enough to make me rush and call my friend about it. Plus, there's sort of a hint to it in Mother 2. I can't name any specifics because it's about the next game, but we're doing a CD-ROM for the Super Famicom." He then goes on, after being asked if this will be an RPG, and says, "Well, even with Mother 2, I feel like it isn't really in the RPG category. Like, making an RPG out of a game and making it out of a story are two different things. RPGs often refer to games in which one plays the part of the character, but even more than role-playing, it usually seems like a simulation game. I don't know if there's any other way of putting it. But you know, the CD-ROM game after Mother 2 is gonna be a good one. Won't do much good if I just go around barking, 'It's so good,' though." It's interesting to see the shift in Itoi's attitude towards making games. Before Mother 2 was even finished, he was already ready to suggest the third could be made, and after Mother 3's release, he hasn't shown much interest in creating any video games of any kind. And in case this is the first time you're hearing of it, the SNES CD was an unreleased add-on for the Super Nintendo that would function similar to the Sega CD, enabling CD-quality audio, video, and generally far more storage space for games to utilize. Part of the reason this never came to fruition was because Nintendo's partnership with Sony fell through, leading to both the Sony PlayStation and the CDI Zelda games.
One of the most bizarre discoveries made about the series was found by Lone, a translator, who discovered lines from the original version of Mother 3 that were completely cut in localization. They all are apparently several lines in Youngtown spoken by a few of the distraught young children, who basically all ask Anna to breastfeed them. These are the lines that these 3 children are saying. Very, very bizarre implications here, especially considering that Anna is 12 years old. It may have been meant to demonstrate just how young these kids that are all on their own are, that they see Anna as a motherly figure. But yeah, something that will never make it past the censors at localization. Another fan theory, some have suggested that the Nice Person hot springs in the Empire Porky were made from the melted material of the Mani Mani statue to utilize its mind-controlling capabilities. A couple holes here. For starters, the statue was sort of destroyed in EarthBound. They could have melted the broken pieces, sure, but seeing as when the statue is defeated in Moonside it completely disappears, I'd assume the statue's power is probably gone, or at the very least not that strong anymore. While we can dissect that these people are being prepped for mind control, or are even actively in the process of being so, from unused content and the such, this is clearly a visual allusion to the kidnapped people in Mother 1 on Mountie Toy, where they were being kept and manipulated without any influence from a Mani Mani idol. In EarthBound's data, there's a file called this. It appears to have been some sort of scrap thing, but it remains in the final game's code. An unused block of text somewhere cites this file, but due to it being cut, the game never runs into a situation where it's called on to be ran.
Tamers is an interesting fellow, to say the least. He's known now for his animated series Sonic Underground, which he has claimed full rights to, continuing to make the show that was cancelled decades ago as if it never was. Did I mention he also hates the Sonic games? He creates the show now supposedly all on his own at an impressive rate that's so consistent with animation so long, many have questioned if the person of Tamers is actually multiple actors, though I doubt it. His version of Sonic Underground is more like a sitcom, with its characters living in relatively typical circumstances with bizarre things taking place each episode, and even he shows up sometimes. There's so much lore to this show, but that's really not the focus of this segment. I will say, however, please watch it if you haven't. It's genuinely amazing, but I did need to give you that general context for why he's included here. He's been doing the show regularly for more than a decade now, but just before the proper show technically started, he made several EarthBound and Mother 3 animations. Some are more impressive than others, and some are just cobbled together videos of other people's work, or just straight up re-uploads. But nonetheless, this means he is deeply connected to the Mother fandom, and we're proud to have him. Have to be honest, the line of which of these animations are his and which are stolen is a hard line to draw, as he's demonstrated some impressive skills over time, so even I'm not entirely sure. Let's just hope we see some of these iconic characters become cast members of Sonic Underground at some point. In late 2017, out of nowhere, a small YouTube channel owned by Tyler Banadiga released a video of a feature-length adaptation of Mother 1, as a sort of animated stage play called the Mother Toy Theater production. The video's flown under the radar for quite some time, only having around 5,000 views as of the time of writing this. The quality of the entire production is very impressive, adapting both elements of the game and taking much inspiration from the aforementioned novel adaptation, with the characters being portrayed by paper cutouts. This is probably as close to a film adaptation of a Mother game as will ever come, and can be touted as one of the very rare fan-made films that actually adapts and completed the full story, with most attempts in the past being dropped pretty early on in development. Aside from the production, Tyler's channel mainly consists of his original music, lots of it dating back pretty far. Tyler's effort is not unnoticed, and I hope perhaps someday he'll pursue toy adaptations of not only the other Mother games, but other media, and maybe even his own completely original works as well. Posadism is mostly known for being a fringe communist ideology that focuses on nuclear force being used to destroy capitalism, and with a lot of UFOology added in. Some have drawn parallels between this belief system and the ultimate event that a worldwide scaled apocalypse is what finally defeats the imperialist pig mask army. Another common belief in Posadism is that alien lifeforms will come to Earth to assist in this revolution, which many connect the extraterrestrial motif throughout the series to, though the pigmasks are essentially alien-like hovercrafts too, so make of that what you will. In the early 2010s, the EarthBound Zero community saw a little life injected back into it when adult-oriented ROM hacks started sprouting up. Perhaps the most famous of these is one called Red Rocket, which is just a conglomerate of smut and shock humor. To not dwell on this one too long, the hack was made by Coco, and revolves around the main characters violating animals. It's crude and gross and has lots more disgusting stuff in it. Appropriately, it originated from badhacks.net. Another mature Mother 1 ROM hack is Cooey Found Weed, which is much less gross than the former. You sort of get the idea from the name alone, right? This fad didn't go on much further though, and these are actually some of the only completed Mother 1 hacks out there, but thankfully have been overshadowed by ones like the Mother 25th Anniversary hack and Mother Restored, though there have been very few fully original ones that aren't just the regular game with quality of life and other improvements.
The make-believe theory is one of those low-tier, what if this story was all a dream theories that EarthBound is just Ness and his 3 friends playing pretend, leaning even more into the just like a kid in his backyard angle. This theory is obviously entirely ridiculous and unfounded, and creates several problems with the continuity of the franchise, given Gygas' altered form between the first 2 games and Porky's presence in Mother 3. While the game sought to emulate the feeling of kids playing, this theory is just that premise taken a bit too literally, as there's literally nothing in any of the games to suggest that what they're doing isn't actually happening in their universe. Not to mention, it makes things like the mysterious woman in Threed much more suspicious than it already is. 0 out of 10 theory. Stop doing this. Be better. Now this is some esoteric knowledge. You ever seen that one EarthBound 64 screenshot of Tazamili Village from 1999 where the ground is made of sand, but then in the demo also from 1999 the ground is now grassy, and for some reason the door textures are different? That's because this game was changing constantly during this busy development phase. In 1999 there were at least 3 different builds for the game shown off. The one shown in promo screenshots, the one shown in the Space World 99 trailer, and the actual demo build, and all have slight differences from each other. EarthBound 64's development was simultaneously extremely public, while also being very mysterious. Makes you hopeful a playable build will someday surface to answer some of these questions. There's this one singular EarthBound 64 screenshot released in early 1997 of a snowy area. On the side of the image is a parka-wearing NPC that's holding up a sign that is advertising Honolulu Summer Resort, also known as the City of Lights. It's theorized by hardcore EarthBound 64 fans that this was actually the name of what Great Scale Village, the cut beach town east of Tazamili mentioned earlier, was to become after the time skip.
Mr. Yotere was a character and species that was cut from the Mother series. Originally set to debut in EarthBound 64, the game was cancelled, but when Mother 3 did eventually get finished and released, they were cut from the final game too. The Mr. Yotere were confirmed seemingly as early as 1997 when art director Benimaru Ito said, "There is a Mr. Saturn village after all. The valley appears too. In addition to Mr. Saturn, there are other characters bound to make you cry. Mr. Saturn was originally created from a Toy-san's doodling, but these new crying characters were born from that as well. It'll spoil the fun if I say too much, so I won't reveal more about it. But I believe these characters are with a personality just like a toy." The Mr. Yotere were intended to be wooden bear-like creatures with a leaf on their heads, in a similar vein to the Mr. Saturn, and they were supposed to live in the little egg-shaped huts in Shimodori Forest, which was an early name for the Murasaki Forest present in the final game. The creatures were officially unveiled to the public in the Pollyanna comic book, produced by Hobonichi, where a couple pages were dedicated to the cancelled game, and illustrated by Mother 64 enemy designer Toshinao Aki. Fans reacted to the comic by reaching out to him directly on Twitter, who graciously responded, "Yes, I did design them for Mother 64. The name of this character is Mr. Yotere," finally revealed after 23 years. The only other thing known about them is that they seem to have some sort of connection to the Oso Castle dance. Oh boy, don't research this one. In all seriousness, what is up with Flint's head? All the way back in Volume 20 of the Mother 3 Times, there was a headline titled, "What secret is Mr. Flint hiding underneath his hat?" which reads, "It is often said Flint is the most reliable man in the village of Tazmily. His trademark feature is his hat, which evokes a strong Western spirit. A 7-year-old child, Richie, wondered what could be underneath his hat, inspiring it to become a topic among the villagers. Even in this publication, we are seeking theories from our readers. Please send them to the editorial department." Obviously, Flint's head was something of interest even back then. We're all aware now how at the end of the GBA version of Mother 3 when we see Flint is bald, right? It seems this was to come at an earlier point in the N64 version of the game. As if we once again look at the scene of the party grabbing onto the airship, if you look really carefully, Flint isn't wearing his hat, and he's bald. So both post-time skip GBA and N64 Flint are bald. But what about pre-time skip? There's this one promo image from Mother 3i of Flint and Hanawa from when the twins were born, and he's as bald as ever even back then. What? Yeah, to be honest, I suspect the only reason he's bald here is because they didn't want to make some sort of new design of Flint with hair for this one singular promo image, and just used his design of him without his hat on that's actually in the game, despite the weird implication this creates about when he must have gone bald. What about N64 pre-time skip Flint? Was he bald too? That is a mystery that may possibly remain for a long time. The people in Tazmily might be really stupid. Volume 17 of the Mother 3 Times has a headline that mentions, "The newly discovered square tire runs around well," and says, "The topic of square tires became very popular in parts of Tazmily Village, since they rotate much smoother than the traditional triangular ones." This is a result of experimentation during an annual meeting between Tazmilly's youth club. They seemed quite confident that even better tires could be made in the future. Like, I get the joke here, with low poly N64 games it's difficult to make a really round surface look, round, but this just implies, however, that the Tazmilly residents are really dumb.
Jackie is the biggest cryptid of EarthBound 64 by far. Not only does he look different in every image he's in, and not only is he present in that one image where he's helping rescue Lyda, which doesn't fit with his characterization we know from the GBA version, but just look at him. Look, I love EarthBound 64's visuals, and I think it's a cool looking game, and I love most of the character designs too, even the NPCs, but this guy, he scares me. Oh my goodness, we finally reached it. The dog is ugly and on crack, LOL. The epitome of comedy gold for discussing EarthBound 64 in any capacity. Boney looks weird, guys. He looks like he's on crack. Her. Look, if you don't like this design, that's fine. I think he's cute. But in his defense, what you've probably seen of him isn't actually representative of how Boney was meant to look in this game. To summarize, in the Space Sword 99 family render with Lucas, Klaus, Flint and Boney, Boney's eyes are messed up. Like, literally, his eyes were not meant to look like that in the game, and without getting overly technical, they were meant to be animated in a very endearing, cartoony way. And this promo render mistakenly keeps the eyes in an unposed state that results in them looking weird. I made a whole video about that if you'd like the more technical explanation. Oh Boney, we'll look out for you. There is reportedly extended footage from the Space Sword 99 trailer for Mother 3 that was broadcast on television in Japan under the Nintendo TV show 64 Mario Stadium. If that name sounds familiar, it's probably because very recently, unseen footage of Luigi in Super Mario 64 shown at Space Sword 95 was uncovered from an episode of this show uploaded online last year. So yeah, never say never. We could randomly one day see this episode be uploaded online and get some new EarthBound 64 footage. Let's hope. Back in 2000, sometime before EarthBound 64's cancellation, Tomato, who you hopefully remember from earlier as the main guy behind the Mother 3 fan translation, was studying in Japan and was actually able to pre-order EarthBound 64 at a store. Of interest was something he saw at said store. I quote, "Now for the weird part. On the in-store advertisement, it said that the game was to be released in May. I'd like to get a scan of that advertisement for you all, but I gotta work up confidence. Having some goofy foreigner ask to borrow a store ad isn't an everyday thing, you know. In the time since then, no photos of said store advertisement have ever surfaced, and it has fallen into obscurity ever since. Who knows if one of these things survived?" Now this is an intriguing question with an unfortunate answer. You may or may not have noticed, if you're a long-time Mother series fan, new images of EarthBound 64 weren't really beginning to be uncovered and preserved until 2019, almost 20 years after the game's cancellation. But why did it take this long? Honestly, it's because no one really cared about EarthBound 64 until that year. Most Mother fans kinda just dismissed it as that unreleased version of Mother 3 that got cancelled because it's ugly. I can thankfully say that people now in the fanbase generally care a lot more about the artistic merit behind all the Mother games, and can now appreciate the history that went into these games. Hosted on the website of a Mother fan who attended Space Sword 99 was a zip file containing approximately 40 photos of the Mother 3 booth at Space Sword 99. Despite the page linking to the zip file being saved by the Wayback Machine, the zip file itself was not backed up, meaning that this zip file and all of these unique photos of the demo are all lost. This is devastating, of course, but it's not impossible that someone republished the zip download on some other old Mother fan site that could be backed up, or someone still somehow has these photos from the zip file saved after 25 years. If you happen to have been a Mother fan from all the way back, check your hard drives, please. You could be sitting on an EarthBound 64 goldmine. Thankfully, not every single photo was lost, as Tomato managed to save and republish the ones from this dude's site that weren't from the zip file, but the rest as of now are lost media. Continuing on from the previous entry, the name of the Mother fan who attended Space Sword 99 and took these photos went by the username Excelsior and hosted their own website in the late 90s called Dosai-san Online, with a section dedicated to the Mother series. However, in the early 2000s, Excelsior, as well as his website, would disappear with seemingly no trace. Excelsior seemingly has never reappeared anywhere and his current whereabouts are unknown. Maybe, just maybe if he's still around, he still has all those EarthBound 64 demo photos.
As just one final nail in the coffin towards photos from Space World 99 and the Mother 3 booth, did you know that Nintendo actually disallowed people attending from taking photos and videos while there, which would explain the limited photos available from the event? In some now-deleted messages from Togamet2, known for releasing various Nintendo game prototypes, an employee at Nintendo of America reportedly had a prototype copy of EarthBound 64 in 2000 at the NOA office, as the game is apparently still being considered for a localization at this point. It's unknown if the cart remained in North America after this point, so it's possible that all these years later the prototype cartridge for the game is still floating around somewhere in Seattle. Get searching, people! It seems that due to its status as an unreleased project, the developers of EarthBound 64 are under a non-disclosure agreement regarding their work on the game. It seems some exceptions are allowed, like when Toshinao Aoki revealed Mr. Yotore, but for the most part, the people behind the game aren't allowed to show their material. Did you know that Benimaru Ito was actually planning on publishing all the concept art he made for the game, but was denied this permission by Nintendo? And here comes our final EarthBound 64 entry. As discussed earlier, the game reached a point of at least 60% completion before cancellation, with mostly polishing left. But what if there was some other huge thing left? Remember, this is a project that had thousands of hours poured into it and was in a state that could be playable from the beginning of the game to at least mostly into Chapter 3 with little to no issues. For them to decide they couldn't push through and just finish the game, there had to have been something glaring not complete, but we don't know what. Things like the game's battle system, physics, and other overworld mechanics, as well as assets like maps and character models, seemingly were all complete. So what else was needed? Maybe it was something silly like the save system. And for our final unused GBA Mother 3 related entry, in a previously mentioned unused conversation where Newpork Island is mentioned, Kumatora and Duster speak with Lokria, the mystery 7th Magypsy who is revealed to have been Facade all along. What this dialogue indicates is that perhaps instead of being killed by the player, Facade's fate differed quite drastically. One theory is that with the use of the Nice Person Hot Springs, Facade was to forget the preceding events of the game and his actions as Facade, reverting back to Lokria. This would have been a really interesting fate for him. This is reflected too with Duster's outburst in this scene. Duster is otherwise depicted to be a very level-headed character, so perhaps the frustrating reality of not being able to get back at Facade here would have annoyed him enough to make him lose his temper. Ultimately, this dialogue being cut presents instead the angle of Lokria willingly siding with Porky and giving away the secrets of the Needles, making his ultimate fate feel quite deserved.
The Game Boy camera was a lousy add-on for the Game Boy that lets players take pictures they could then print out and hardly see. This add-on did have credits though, as using it required a cartridge with the attachment on it to be plugged into the console. During the credits, the music from the Twinkle Elementary School from Mother 1 plays. This has become Hirokazu Tanaka, one of the composers from Mother 1 and 2, did the music programming for the Game Boy camera, which explains why this song could have ended up here. EarthBound Crypt of the Ancients is a creepypasta popularized by the Some Ordinary Gamers. It's pretty cliche and cringy. The story is of a guy named Nick who falls into possession of an original copy of EarthBound. Already completely unbelievable, I know. The game's broken though, so he takes it to a repair shop, only to find it plays vastly differently once he plays it afterwards. He says that once he leaves Winter's boarding house as Jeff, Tony says some slightly off things then strokes Jeff's arms. Jeff then murders a gruff goat and Bubble Monkey is sad. Eventually, Bubble Monkey, Undertale style, starts asking Nick to not murder the animals. You know, the ones possessed by a comic demon actively trying to kill you. When he eventually gets to 3, Ness and Paula are tied up and he gets the option of release or to kill them. The next part I'll just read to you. A long pair of 16-bit claws popped out of the wall behind Ness and slowly grabbed him as the whispers grew louder and louder. Jeff just stood, but Paula said, "Stop! Where are you taking him?" The game was still for about a minute until the whispers started becoming understandable. They just kept repeating, "The crypt, the crypt, the crypt." After that, Ness just faded through the wall and the game went silent yet again. He then just keeps playing normally up until the mood training. Nothing strange here. Pooh's ancestor then says, "You have proved that you are selfish, too afraid to lose that which is precious to you, and too afraid to die. One such as you truly belongs in the crypt." Then the claws pop out again and take Pooh down under. The game just resumes normally again with only Jeff and Paula, all the way up until Gygus is defeated. The remaining two are then dragged down with the line, "You may have defeated Gygus, but now you have fulfilled your only purposes. You played a dangerous game. Now join your friends in the Crypt of the Ancients," being said. The player is then brought to a green room with 4 doors reading Cage of Fear, Cage of Helplessness, Cage of Silence, and Cage of Evil. The Cage of Silence has Ness's skeleton chained to the wall. The Cage of Fear is the same but with Pooh still alive, with a look of pure terror. The Cage of Evil has Jeff actively being eaten alive by vultures, and the Cage of Helplessness leaves the game to literally speak to Nick that Paula is being spared, and is teleported outside of Polestar Preschool. The game then shuts off on its own. The story's ending is pretty lackluster. He just gives the game back to his friend who says the game played normal for him. There's the issue with these haunted video game stories. There's never really anywhere to go for the ending, since the game can't really believably kill the writer. Even Ben Drowned, probably the most famous of these and likely best haunted video game creepypasta, couldn't pull it off convincingly. It is notable though as being pretty much the only longer form Earthbound creepypasta out there. The Tigers, The World is Waiting for Us is a 1968 Japanese comedy film that many cite as an influence on Mother 1. The movie is about a band called the Tigers, whose music is so powerful it attracts aliens to Earth. The Tigers have to protect an alien princess who escaped from the ship and became obsessed with their lead singer Julie. The film was conceived as a starring vehicle for the band, who were a real band by the way, active from the late 60s to the early 70s, with a brief reunion in the 80s. They had some hits like Smile for Me, which was probably their most well-known song, and was written by the Bee Gees. They were then shoved into several movies and TV shows, this being one of those. The movie was a big hit, and many have noticed similarities between it and Mother 1's climax. At the end of the movie, the space princess Sylvie tries to bring Julie, the lead singer, to her home planet on a spaceship, but the rest of the band plays music, and through the power of the crowd's energy, the ship comes back, allowing them to rescue him. People have noted the similarity to how the Chosen Four in Earthbound Beginnings must use the power of love and music to drive off the alien invaders as well. Thank you all for watching. I hope you learned something new through this, and thank you to all these people who created so many of the original icebergs we drew upon, and stay tuned for more Earthbound videos.